Chapter 2981. The two black-robed men were shocked by the scene in front of them. Could it be that the Wu family secretly sent experts to protect them? The other black-robed man guessed. Yes, that must be it. Damn the Wu family. One of the black-robed men roared. They thought that the Wu family secretly sent experts to protect Lu Ming and the rest. That was why the men of sacrifice they sent out were all wiped out. It's too late to send experts to kill them now. What should we do? Once they enter the starry camp, we won't be able to do anything. One of the black-robed men said. We can only report the situation to our superiors and wait for the Lord to make a decision. However, even if he enters the starry camp, he won't be safe. Let's go. With a flash, the few black-robed men disappeared without a trace. Along the way, Lu Ming and the rest were even more careful. Luckily, they didn't encounter any danger. Not long after, they finally arrived at the starry camp. This is the starry camp? Lu Ming looked at the barren land in front of him and was stunned. This is all an illusion. There's a large formation ahead. Let's continue. Wu Ming said. The four of them continued to move forward and stepped into the barren land. At this moment, the space around Lu Ming and the rest suddenly rippled. Then, two white-haired old men suddenly appeared. This is the starry camp. What are you four here for? One of the old men said. Seniors, we are here to join the starry camp. Wu Ming bowed respectfully. Oh, do you have proof? The old man who spoke before continued. Seniors, please take a look. Then, Lu Ming and the rest took out the Demon King token and Demon Lord token. One of the old men waved his hand and kept the token. After checking it carefully, he said, This is the proof for one of the tests. Congratulations on joining the starry camp. Then, he waved his hand and the space rippled. Then, a light door appeared out of nowhere. Go in. The two old men waved their hands. Thank you, seniors. Lu Ming and the rest cupped their fists and stepped into the light door. After stepping into the light door, Lu Ming and the rest arrived at a square. What a dense divine aura! As soon as he entered, Lu Ming felt that the divine qi here was much richer than outside. Then Lu Ming looked at him. Quite a few people had already gathered in the square. At a glance, there were at least a few hundred people. Looks like we're late. Everyone else has arrived. Wu Yu said. It was obvious that these people were like Lu Ming and the rest, new recruits to the Starry Sky Camp. It's them. Lu Ming glanced around and saw some familiar faces. For example, the blood-robed youth, Wu Xue, and the others he had met on the Devil Capital Mountain. Kid, it's you. Wu Xue and the others also saw Lu Ming and looked over with unfriendly gazes. Haha, we are really fated to meet here again. Lu Ming smiled. Hee, it's fate. Kid, let's wait and see. Wu Xue's senior brother, the blood-soaked youth, said coldly. You're still lacking. Lu Ming said disdainfully. Arrogant. Wu Xue's senior brother shouted coldly as his eyes were filled with killing intent. He couldn't fight here and he was indeed not Lu Ming's opponent. However, this was the Starry Sky Camp and many of his senior brothers were in the camp. Lu Ming would be in trouble in the future. Lu Ming smiled faintly and couldn't be bothered with these people. He walked to the side with Qiu Yu, Wu Ming, and Wu Yu and waited quietly. Another hour passed, and another dozen or so people arrived one after another. At this moment, a shadow flashed in the air and a burly man in linen clothes appeared. Welcome to the Starry Sky Camp. Now, follow me. I will arrange your accommodations. The burly man said. Thank you, senior. Someone cupped his fist. Hee. The burly man in linen clothes smiled meaningfully and turned around to leave. The rest followed. After flying across the square, a huge mountain appeared in front of them. This mountain took up a large area and was very tall. It was at least a few 100,000 feet tall. Looking from afar, one could see the mountain with many buildings. From afar, the burly man in linen clothes landed on the ground. The rest followed and landed on the ground as well. With that mountain as the center, the core area of the Starry Sky Camp is 100,000 miles away. In the future, you will cultivate and rest within that area. The burly man in linen clothes said. Yes. Many people nodded their heads. Also, let me tell you, the new members are not allowed to fly within that area. They can only walk. Do you understand? The burly man in linen clothes said. Not allowed to fly? Is there a flight restriction array in there? Someone asked. No, there is no flight restriction array. Even an empty god can fly freely. However, you are not allowed to fly. That is the rule. The burly man in linen clothes paused and sneered. Once someone breaks the rule, he will be expelled from the Starry Sky Camp and will never be recruited again. Expelled from the Starry Sky Camp forever. Many people's faces changed. There was a rule in the Taishu dynasty. In order to enter the core area of the Taishu dynasty to cultivate, one must be recommended by the Starry Sky Camp. In the future, if one wanted to climb up the ranks and gain fame in the Taishu dynasty, one must pass this step. If they were expelled from the Starry Sky Camp, they would lose the opportunity to cultivate in the core area of the Taishu dynasty. Not only that, it would be difficult for them to gain fame in the Taishu dynasty no matter how high their cultivation was. It was not easy for them to join the Starry Sky Camp. They would not allow themselves to be expelled. Not allowed to fly. Many people firmly remembered this rule in their hearts. All right, come with me, the burly man in linen clothes said and walked forward. Although they could not fly and could only walk, with their cultivation, they were still as fast as lightning. After a while, they entered the range of the mountain. The closer they got to the mountain, the thicker the divine chi became. There was even a mysterious fluctuation in the air that could clear one's mind and make one's mind more active. Here I can feel that the speed of comprehending divine skills and practicing secret arts is much faster. Me too. It said that the mountain peak is called Star Peak. At the peak of Star Peak, there's a supreme treasure that constantly emits a mysterious fluctuation. Under the influence of this fluctuation, even one's comprehension ability becomes much stronger. Sure enough, it's true. Some people discussed softly with excitement on their faces. I hope that you will be able to laugh later. The burly man in linen clothes laughed. What do you mean? Many people looked at each other after hearing what the burly man in linen clothes said. The burly man in linen clothes did not reply and continued to move forward. Soon, they reached the foot of the mountain. Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air could be heard above their heads. A few youths had flown over their heads. More newcomers. Time really flies. The youths were chatting. Chapter 2982. Looking at the young men flying above their heads, many of them were puzzled. Senior, how can they fly? A young man asked curiously. They can fly because they live on top of it. The burly man pointed at the buildings on top of the mountain. There were some buildings built from the waist of the mountain. There were grand palaces and elegant courtyards. What do you mean by living on top of it? Are we not living on top of it? Many of the young men were puzzled. Correct. You are indeed not living on top of it because you are not qualified. The burly man said. If we are not qualified, then where are we staying? Someone asked. Follow me. The burly man did not answer. He smiled and continued to move forward. Everyone was curious and followed closely behind him. After they went over a few hills, a foul smell assaulted their noses. So smelly. Especially some of the girls. They frowned and showed a disgusted expression. You all will live there. The burly man pointed ahead. Everyone looked over. There was a spacious land in front of them. There were many small houses that were built simply with wood. Most importantly, there was a pasture around these wooden houses. There were many strange desolate beasts that were being reared there. The source of the foul smell was the mixture of the desolate beasts' feces and urine. What do you mean we will live in such a place? Impossible, I will not live in such a place. Is such a rubbish place for humans to live in? A few of the girls shrieked. It's fine if you don't want to. Scram. The burly man said coldly. A few of the girls shut their mouths. However, they looked around and were obviously thinking of a solution. Let me tell you. You have to stay here even if you don't want to. You cannot stay anywhere else. This is the rule. If you violate it, you will be expelled from the interstellar camp forever. The burly man said coldly. Some of the girls turned pale and some of the men frowned. Some people did indeed have the same idea earlier. They might as well not stay here and find a clean place to cultivate. However, they had to stay. This was the rule. Those who could join the interstellar camp were all absolute geniuses that possessed divine-grade divine power. In the Chin Tian starfield, they were equivalent to divine sons. 90% of them were from big factions or clans. When had they ever stayed in such a place? Many people frowned. They didn't expect that they would have to stay in such a place after coming to the Starry Camp. Moreover, none of the people who had joined the Starry Camp in the past had said that there was such a rule. Also, I'm warning you all. The rules of the Starry Camp must not be leaked. If you do, you will be expelled from the Starry Camp and will never be allowed to enter again. The burly man said again. Many of the young women had pale faces, and many of them had bitter mouths. Senior, what do I have to do to be able to live there? Someone pointed to the buildings on the mountain peak and asked. The buildings here were at the foot of the mountain. Compared to the buildings halfway up the mountain, the difference was like heaven and earth. If you want to live there, it's very simple. It's a challenge. As long as you can defeat the people up there, you will be able to replace them. You will be able to live up there and cultivate. At the same time, you will be able to fly freely in this region. The burly man in sackcloth said. This made many people's eyes burn with passion. Challenge. As long as one defeated the person who lived above him, they would be able to replace him. Obviously, not only was the environment of the buildings at the top of the mountain much better than at the foot of the mountain, the closer one was to the top of the mountain, the greater the influence of the treasures at the top of the star peak, and the better one's comprehension ability. On top of that, they would be able to fly. They could clearly fly, but they couldn't. They could only watch as others looked at them from above. That feeling was indescribable. I want a challenge. A young woman shouted, emitting a powerful aura from her body. 8th layer Heavenly God Realm. This woman was an 8th layer Heavenly God Realm cultivator, and she was in control of divine grade divine power. If she was in the Qin Tian Starfield, she would be an unrivaled genius. However, it was very normal here. Everyone's expression was calm, and there was no surprise at all. In the 9 Extinction Heavenly King residence, the basic requirement to be called a genius was to be in control of divine grade divine power. Those who had not mastered divine grade divine power could not be called geniuses. I want a challenge too. Me too. Who would want to live in such a god-forsaken place? Many people shouted. These people were all geniuses in the outside world, people who were 1 in a billion. They were all full of confidence in themselves. You can't challenge them yet. You have to stay in those buildings for 7 days. You can only challenge them after 7 days. The burly man in sackcloth said coldly. What do you mean by we have to stay for 7 days? What kind of rule is that? No, I don't want to stay. Senior, can you give me a way out? I'll challenge them and stay there after 7 days. Many people wailed. You don't want to stay? Sure. Please go back and stay in your palace's courtyard. The burly man in sackcloth said indifferently, then stepped forward. Those who were wailing could only sigh. They could only endure it for now. Don't talk nonsense. Come with me. Each of you will choose a room within an incense's time. If you don't choose a room by then, I'll personally send you home. The burly man in sackcloth said. Everyone sighed, and could only follow and start choosing their rooms. Some people wanted to choose the rooms that were further away from the ranch, and had a weaker stench, but they were disappointed. These rooms were built in the middle of the ranch, and they were all the same. Every single one of them smelled terrible. Autumn Moon, are you used to it? Lu Ming looked at Autumn Moon. Young master, don't worry. It's not like Autumn Moon hasn't suffered before. Autumn Moon smiled faintly. Well, then choose a room. 7 days later, I'll bring you to stay there. Lu Ming smiled. After that, Lu Ming, Autumn Moon, Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others all chose a room. After an incense's time, everyone found a room and stayed there. The burly man in sackcloth chuckled and left. Lu Ming walked into the room. The room was very simple. There was only a bed and a wooden table. In the room, a stench came out. Even with Lu Ming's temperament, he couldn't help but frown. Letting out a breath, Lu Ming sat cross-legged and quietly cultivated. 7 days would soon pass, and it didn't matter. However, he could endure it, but some people couldn't. Before a day was up, someone roared. Damn it, what the hell is this place? I'll definitely kill my way up there in 7 days. I'll kill my way up there too. Some people roared, and their voices echoed in the area. Lu Ming smiled faintly. It seemed that there were many people who had the same thoughts as him. However, was it really that easy to kill their way up there? Lu Ming felt that it wouldn't be that easy. The reason for that was because he had observed earlier that before they had moved in, there were many such wooden houses that had been occupied. Those people obviously joined the Starry camp in the past. Those who joined in the past still stayed here. It was obvious that it wouldn't be easy to kill their way up there. Chapter 2983. There were originally many wooden houses here that had people living in them. That meant many of the heavenly geniuses who had entered the Starry Sky camp were still living here. Those heavenly geniuses who were able to enter the Starry Sky camp weren't weak at all. If it was so easy to kill their way up, they would have already done so. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. When the 8th day arrived, several voices echoed in the area. Kill our way up. I want to live up there. I've had enough of this place. Following which, many figures followed the mountain path and rushed towards the star peak. Brother Lu, Miss Autumn Moon. Let's go take a look together. Wu Ming and Wu Yu walked over. All right. Lu Ming nodded. Together with Miss Autumn Moon, they rushed up the mountain path. Haha, these newcomers are going up to challenge us. Several figures began to walk out of the wooden houses. Those people were the old members of the Starry Sky camp. They've only just joined, but each one of them thinks they're infallible. They don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Let's go take a look. It's been a long time since the Starry Sky camp was this lively. A few of the old members of the Starry Sky camp laughed and followed them up the mountain. Star Peak was extremely tall. Even halfway up the mountain, it was still over 100,000 meters tall. But to Lu Ming and the others, that was nothing. They quickly arrived at the halfway point. There were many courtyards built at the halfway point. The divine qi here was dense, and the fragrance of flowers filled their nostrils. It was like heaven and earth compared to the foot of the mountain. Many people's gazes became even more fiery. They swore that they would definitely seize a courtyard this time. Everyone in the courtyard, scram out here. A robust youth was the most impatient. He directly appeared in front of a courtyard and roared. Who's shouting? You're courting death. A cold voice sounded out from the courtyard. Then, the door opened and a youth with a grim expression walked out. The callous youth's gaze swept over Lu Ming and the others. His gaze landed on the robust youth and he disdainfully said, Newcomer. So what if I'm a newcomer? Let me tell you, I've taken a fancy to your courtyard. I challenge you right now. Do you dare accept my challenge? If you don't, then scram. The muscular young man shouted with a confident look on his face. You want to challenge me? Haha, good. Go ahead. If you can defeat me, this monastery is yours. The cold-looking young man looked relaxed, as if he didn't put the burly young man in his eyes at all. Arrogant. Heaven-shaking divine elephant. Suppress. The burly young man shouted as a powerful aura erupted from his body. 8th level celestial god. The muscular young man's cultivation had reached the 8th layer heaven god realm. Needless to say, his god force was at the divine level too. Divine power burst forth. As the burly young man pushed out his palms, a giant elephant condensed. It was 10,000 meters tall and stood between the heavens and the earth. It trampled towards the cold young man. Humph, it's just a facade. The grim young man said coldly. His figure suddenly flashed and rushed out like a goshawk. Chi Lathan, the cold-looking youth waved his hand and clawed out. His claws were very small compared to the giant elephant, but when his sharp claws grabbed the giant elephant, they burst forth with terrifying power. Touched the gigantic elephant's body directly exploded. How is this possible? The burly youth was shocked. He didn't expect that his ultimate move would be broken so easily. Shwa shwa. After the cold young man defeated the giant elephant, he didn't stop moving. In a flash, he appeared above the burly young man's head and clawed down. The burly young man's expression changed drastically. He punched out with all his strength, and the sound of elephant trumpeting could be heard. He wanted to condense another giant elephant to fight against the cold young man. However, the cold young man's claws were incomparably sharp. They penetrated downwards, and the giant elephant couldn't be condensed. Moreover, the burly young man's defense was as fragile as tofu in front of the cold young man. The cold young man's claws heavily clawed at the burly young man's shoulder. The burly young man cried out in pain. The bones in his shoulder were broken, and blood splattered everywhere. Then, the cold young man swung his hand and smashed the burly young man heavily onto the ground. Boom! The ground shook, and the burly young man cried out in pain. His body bounced up like a rubber ball before falling down. He laid on the ground, twitching non-stop. He was severely injured. Simony people sucked in a cold breath. The burly young man's fighting strength was definitely not weak. He was an 8th layer heavenly god. He was definitely above average among the newcomers. However, he couldn't even withstand a single blow from the cold young man. 9th layer heavenly god. His cultivation has already reached the 9th layer heavenly god. Don't tell me that the people living in these villas are all 9th layer heavenly gods? Thinking of this, many people's expression became incomparably ugly. If the people living here were all 9th layer heavenly gods, then those below the 9th layer wouldn't be able to challenge them. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to live at the foot of the mountain for a long time? Thinking of the stench at the foot of the mountain, many people felt nauseous and almost vomited. How could this be? Damn it! Many people roared, their hearts turning cold. 9th layer heavenly god. Is it really that simple? How naive. Some of the older members sneered. Who else wants to challenge me? Lang Ying. Hurry up and make your move. I don't have that much time to waste with you. The cold young man swept his gaze across the crowd and said coldly. His name was Lang Ying. He really lived up to his name. Many people looked at each other, weighing their own strength. In the end, they shook their heads helplessly. If their strength couldn't surpass the sturdy young man, they would only be looking for trouble. I'll go. At this moment, a sonorous voice resounded. A black-robed young man stepped out. This person carried a long sword on his back, like an unsheathed divine sword. It's him. Lu Ming's eyes moved. He recognized this person. He was one of the 4 9th layer heavenly gods who attacked the Dark Knight Devil King in the Devil Capital Mountain. He was a sword cultivator. It's Xuedong. He's going to make his move. Xuedong is a 9th layer heavenly god and a sword cultivator. He has a chance to defeat his opponent. Seeing Xuedong make his move, some people's eyes lit up. If Xuedong could defeat his opponent, it would give them a lot of hope. Hee, an ordinary 9th layer heavenly god wants to defeat Lang Ying? What wishful thinking. One of the older members sneered. They're both 9th layer heavenly gods. Xuedong is also a sword cultivator known for his offensive strength. How do you know that Xuedong can't defeat Lang Ying? A new member said unhappily. Ignorant. Just watch and you'll know. The older member said disdainfully. Make your move. Use your strongest move. Otherwise, you won't have a chance when I make my move. Lang Ying said coldly. Even though he was facing Xuedong, his face was still filled with disdain. Kung Xuedong was very straightforward. He made his move right away. Unsheathing his long sword, a bright and sharp sword light streaked across the void, slashing at Lang Ying. Chapter 2984. Xuedong's sword was extremely sharp. It slashed across the void, aiming for Lang Ying's chest. However, in the face of Xuedong's terrifying attack, Lang Ying's expression remained relaxed. He stretched out a hand and clawed out. Chi-chi. A sharp sound broke through the air. Lang Ying's claw turned into a divine eagle's claw, grabbing Xuedong's sword. Clang! Sparks flew, the divine eagle screeched, and the sword light vibrated. In the next moment, Xuedong's sword light shattered. A figure quickly retreated 100 meters before stabilizing himself. The person who retreated was Xuedong, while Lang Ying remained motionless. Many people were shocked. How could this be? Xuedong and Lang Ying were both 9th level heavenly gods, and Xuedong was a sword cultivator who specialized in offense. How could he be pushed back by Lang Ying? Xuedong's eyes turned serious. His aura became stronger, and sword intent filled the air. Countless tiny sword chi wandered around him. Lone Star Destruction Sword. Xuedong roared. He struck out with his sword again, releasing countless sword chi. However, in the next moment, the sword chi condensed into a sword light as thick as a mountain, slashing at Lang Ying. Have you used your ultimate move? This move is more like it. Lang Ying's cold voice sounded. Then, Lang Ying soared into the sky, using his divine power. He seemed to have turned into a divine eagle, waving his blade-like wings. Boom, 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 boom. Violent energy collided with each other, creating 1,000 layers of energy waves. In an instant, there were hundreds of explosions. In the end, the sword light vibrated and shattered in the air. Then, a divine eagle flashed and disappeared. Following that, a figure screamed and retreated. Boom, Xuedong's body landed heavily on the mountain peak, vomiting blood. His chest was torn open, and there were a few bloody holes. They were obviously caused by the eagle's claws. Defeated. Xuedong, a 9th-level heavenly god sword cultivator, was defeated in just 2 moves. Why? Many new members were pale, unable to believe it. They were at the same level, and both of them had divine-grade divine power. Why was Xuedong defeated so badly? It's divine power. His divine power is about to awaken his origin factor. Suddenly, someone shouted, "What? Origin factor?" Someone exclaimed. However, there were also some people that revealed bewildered expressions. What was the origin factor? What is origin factor? Lu Ming muttered. He had never heard of it before. Brother Lu, you don't know about the origin factor? Wu Ming looked at Lu Ming and said, I don't know. Brother Wu, what is the origin factor? Lu Ming shook his head and asked. The origin factor is the origin of a kind of divine power. Brother Lu, you should know that the primitive universe is divided into 2 eras, right? Wu Ming said. Yeah, there are 2 eras. The earliest one is the era of incipient God and the last one is the heavenly palace era. Lu Ming nodded. He had read about this in the ancient records long ago. The long history of this universe was divided into the incipient God era and the heavenly palace era. In the incipient God era, the universe had just been created. Earth and heaven had given birth to so many intimidating existences. These existences were called incipient gods, the primitive gods. For example, the ancient god clan was also one of the incipient gods. And now, it was the later period of the heavenly palace era. In the incipient god era, the powerful existences were born naturally. They were born with different kinds of divine power. They were called the origin divine power. The current divine power can't be compared to them. Wu Ming said. Not even the divine grade divine power? Lu Ming asked. No, it's not even close. Wu Ming shook his head. The divine grade divine power and the origin divine power can't be compared to each other. The difference in quality is like the difference between rotten wood and gold. Not to mention the incipient god era. Even in the early period of the heavenly palace era, the divine grade divine power was the most basic divine power. Any warrior who had some innate talents could control the divine grade divine power. However, as time passed, the divine chi in the primitive universe became thinner and thinner, and the origin became scarcer and scarcer. Cultivators were scattered all over the universe, so it became more and more difficult to control high-quality divine power. In the end, it evolved into divine power, saint divine power, king divine power, and ordinary divine power. Wu Ming spoke frankly and frankly. As he came from a big aristocratic family, he knew a lot about the history of the ancient desolate universe. Lu Ming was astounded. He didn't expect that in the early period of the heavenly palace era, the divine power that a warrior could control was the divine grade divine power. However, what did it have to do with the origin factor of the divine power? Lu Ming didn't say anything, waiting for Wu Ming to continue. Sure enough, Wu Ming continued. Strictly speaking, saint grade, king grade, and ordinary grade god force are all unqualified god force. These kinds of god force have limited potential. Cultivating to the god-king realm is already the limit. It's impossible to break through any further. The reason is that these divine powers can't awaken the origin factor. Only the divine grade divine power can awaken the origin factor. Actually, every divine grade divine power is evolved from the original divine power of origin, and every divine grade divine power can find a corresponding divine power of origin. Therefore, as long as you continue to awaken the origin factor, the divine grade divine power can be transformed into the corresponding origin divine power. Then you can control the origin and have infinite power. Wu Ming said. At this point, there was a burning flame in his eyes. Then how can I awaken the origin factor? Lu Ming asked again. His heart was burning with passion. Jing Yu didn't leave behind this knowledge. There was no record of it in the universe myriad Dao technique. Comprehension and application. You can only continue to comprehend and control the divine grade divine power. When you reach a certain level, you can naturally awaken the origin factor. Wu Ming said. So, Leng Ying has awakened the origin factor? Lu Ming asked. Impossible. The origin factor isn't that easy to awaken. It's terrifyingly difficult. I'm afraid that not even 1 out of 100 divine grade divine powers can awaken it. Only when one's cultivation reaches the high-level divine king level will the chances be higher. I reckon that Lang Ying is only close to awakening the origin factor. Even so, his divine power will become extremely powerful and infinite. Wu Ming said. Lu Ming nodded. He had a rough understanding of the origin factor of divine power. It seemed that his previous understanding of divine power was wrong. Every divine-grade divine power had huge potential to be unearthed. Then, it seems that my current cultivation path is wrong. Lu Ming whispered. There were 10 types of divine powers in his body, but only 2 of them were divine-grade divine powers. According to Wu Ming, other than divine-grade divine powers, whether it was holy grade, king grade, or ordinary divine powers, they were all incomplete and had limited potential. Chapter 2985. Aside from the divine-grade divine force, the other divine forces had limited potential and could not awaken the origin factor. Therefore, it was meaningless to continue cultivating. It was just a waste of time. Looks like I have to find a chance to cultivate a divine-grade divine technique with a similar attribute to the divine force. Then, I can integrate the divine fire into the divine-grade divine fire. Lu Ming thought. As long as he cultivated a divine-grade divine force with a similar attribute, he could integrate the divine-grade divine force, royal-grade divine force and ordinary-grade divine force. Of course, Lu Ming could also disperse it himself. However, that would be too wasteful. Lu Ming had spent a lot of effort to cultivate each type of divine force. The Starry Camp is the place where the geniuses of the 9-Ju Heavenly King Mansion gather. There should be no shortage of divine-grade divine techniques. Lu Ming thought. A place like the Qin Tian Starfield had several divine-grade divine techniques. The 9-Ju Heavenly King Mansion would definitely not lack divine-grade divine techniques. After all, any one of the geniuses here had mastered divine-grade divine force. Most of the geniuses had relied on divine-grade divine arts to cultivate their cultivation. Lu Ming and Wu Mingyi were discussing. The others were also discussing as they looked at Lang Ying in awe. Lang Ying, even if he had not awakened the origin factor of his divine force, he was close to it. He was invincible among his peers. No wonder Xueqi was defeated so miserably. Who still wants my courtyard? Come and fight, don't waste my time. Lang Ying's eyes swept across the crowd. Many of them lowered their heads when they saw Lang Ying's sharp eyes. No one wanted to fight. Xue Dong's strength was definitely the top among the new members. If even he could not defeat him, the others would only be looking for trouble. I don't believe that the people living here are all so strong. Suddenly, a voice was heard. Many people's eyes lit up. That's right. Perhaps they were just unlucky to have chosen such an expert. Not everyone else had such a cultivation level. Whoosh! In a flash, a young man appeared in front of another courtyard. You want to challenge me? The owner of this courtyard was already alarmed by the commotion outside. He leaned against the door lazily and asked. That's right. I want your courtyard. A 9th-layer heaven god realm aura spread from his body. This was a genius no weaker than Xue Dong. Make your move. The laid-back young man said lazily. Jumping Thunder Fist. The young man who challenged Yi Futian made his move and punched out. Lightning filled the sky and the void trembled. The power of his punch was shocking. However, after a few moves, the lightning dispersed, and the challenger followed in Xue Dong's footsteps and was heavily injured. Defeated again. So strong, this person's strength is also very strong. He is also an existence that is close to awakening the divine power of origin. Someone exclaimed. Everyone else's faces turned pale. Was the second person also this strong? It couldn't be that the people who lived here were also powerful, right? They were all close to awakening the origin divine force factor, right? In that case, no one would be able to succeed today. I don't believe it. Continue. Someone roared and continued to challenge the other monasteries. But reality proved that their guesses were correct. The geniuses who lived here all had shocking strength. They were all existences close to awakening their quintessence god force. Using a crushing method, they defeated them. In the end, no one continued to challenge him. Could it be that we have to stay here forever? No, I want to go home. At the scene, there was a wave of wailing. Of course, it was just wailing. No one really wanted to go home or leave. If they withdrew because of this reason, even if they returned to their respective families, they would probably be spurned. They would never be able to stand out. Sigh, It's better to work hard and cultivate. Try to awaken the origin divine force factor as soon as possible or break through to the half-step divine king realm. That way we can kill our way up here. Yeah. Many people sighed. They finally understood how terrifying the geniuses were. Some people wanted to withdraw. You, wait a moment. Suddenly, a cold voice rang out. An aura spread towards Lu Ming and landed on Autumn Moon. Lu Ming frowned. The owner of that aura was the first person to be challenged, Lang Ying. At this moment, Lang Ying's eyes were flickering with evil flames as he stared at Autumn Moon. Boom! Autumn Moon's aura erupted, wanting to break free from Lang Ying's aura. However, he failed. What is this guy trying to do? Some people were surprised. Miss, you don't have to go down. You can stay in my courtyard. I happen to need a maid. Lang Ying said calmly, his voice sounding like an order. Who wants to be your maid? Dream on. Autumn Moon struggled. You refuse? Lang Ying's eyes flashed and said, you don't have to stay in the smelly place below if you stay here. Moreover, I will guide you in your cultivation when I'm free. This is a great opportunity for you. Do you understand? Lang Ying stared at Autumn Moon. As for Lu Ming, Wu Yu, and Wu Ming, he directly ignored them. Many people looked at Autumn Moon with pity. Lang Ying said it in a dignified manner. In fact, he was only interested in Autumn Moon's beauty and wanted to keep Autumn Moon for himself. However, Autumn Moon was indeed beautiful. The other young men were also tempted. Bam! At this moment, Lu Ming took a step forward and landed in front of Autumn Moon. The ground shook and Lang Ying's aura was defeated. Lang Ying's eyes flashed with killing intent. He finally looked at Lu Ming. Kid, are you trying to be nosy? Lang Ying said coldly. What do you mean by being nosy? She's my woman. You tell me, is this nosy? Lu Ming said calmly. Your woman? Lang Ying's eyes were filled with killing intent when he heard this. He said, it's a waste for such a beauty to fall into your hands. It pisses me off. Then, Lu Ming said calmly. Then I'm going to cripple your eyes. Lang Ying shouted coldly. His body flashed and rushed towards Lu Ming. His 2 fingers were like 2 javelins, piercing towards Lu Ming's eyes. Bang! Lu Ming fully unleashed the god force in his body. At the same time, he activated the battle seal to quadruple his strength. A long spear appeared in Lu Ming's hand silently. The spear shuddered and fired 2 spear glows. Thump! Thump! The spear glows collided with Lang Ying's fingers, resulting in 2 explosions. Lu Ming's figure was knocked a few steps back. However, Lang Ying's figure was knocked back too. What? He blocked it? The others were astounded. Apart from Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and a few others, the others found it hard to believe that Lu Ming was able to block Lang Ying's attack and knock him back. Lu Ming was only a 4th-layer Heaven God Realm cultivator. Even Lang Ying himself was astonished. He never thought that a 4th-layer Heaven God would be able to unleash such shocking power. Chapter 2986. Kid, not bad, but I've only used 20% of my strength. Now I'll show you my true strength. Lang Ying yelled. His aura surged as he circulated his god force, forming a giant eagle around him. Caw! The eagle screeched as Lang Ying pounced at Lu Ming. His sharp claws tore through the air, grabbing at Lu Ming. You're not the only one who hasn't used his full strength. Lu Ming bellowed coldly. Following which, his body swelled rapidly, and he transformed into a green-armored ancient god that was a few hundred meters tall. Bas! His spear vibrated and swept across the mountain, stirring up a strong gust of wind. At the next moment, Lang Ying's claws grabbed Lu Ming's giant spear. Bang! Buzz buzz buzz. The eagle claws grabbed the spear, resulting in a loud explosion and an ear-piercing sound of friction, with sparks flying in all directions. The 2 clashed for a few breaths' time, before the spear shuddered and withdrew. However, Lang Ying's body was knocked a few thousand meters back before he could regain his footing. His claws were placed behind his back, trembling slightly to avoid being seen by others. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Lu Ming's strength had completely exceeded his expectations. Such a terrifying god force. The others were astounded too. Some of the older members, including those who lived on the Star Peak, looked at Lu Ming in astonishment. No one had expected Lu Ming to possess such strength. Ancient god body. It's the ancient god body. I didn't expect him to have cultivated the ancient god body to such an extent. How shocking! What's even more shocking is that he's only a fourth-layer heaven god. Sounds of discussion could be heard all around. They did not expect there to be such a strong genius among the newcomers. I didn't expect there to be a genius like you among the newcomers. You're quite strong. Since you're so strong, I'll let bygones be bygones. You may leave, Lung Ying said. He then waved his hand. Let bygones be bygones? Hee hee, I didn't say that I didn't care. Lu Ming sneered. Lu Ming had no intention of letting the other party off so easily since he dared to touch his woman. What do you want? Lung Ying's face darkened. I've taken a fancy to your courtyard. Now, take your things and scram. Lu Ming said coldly. Lu Ming had been considering who he should challenge, but who would have thought that Frigid Eagle would take the initiative to challenge him? In that case, he might as well start with him. Brat, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Lang Ying shouted coldly, his killing intent cold. I like to drink as a forfeit, so what? If you don't scram, then I'll make you scram. Lu Ming shouted coldly and strode towards Lang Ying. His huge spear pressed down on Lang Ying with the force of Mount Tai. You're courting death. Lang Ying roared furiously. With a long whistle, a huge divine eagle condensed around his body. It carried his body and soared into the sky, charging towards Lu Ming. Boom! The two collided for the second time, and the sky shook violently. Lu Ming's figure shook slightly, but Lang Ying's body retreated quickly. Is this the power of someone who's about to awaken their origin divine force? It's indeed powerful. Lu Ming's mind raced. He felt that Lang Ying's divine force was extremely powerful, and it had almost crushed his own divine force. If he didn't have 10 types of divine force and the support of the battle character art, he wouldn't have been able to withstand it. Again! Lu Ming shouted and continued to attack Lang Ying. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming stepped on the void, and with every step, a 9-clawed dragon would fly out. After 7 steps, 7 9-clawed dragons had formed and pounced on Lang Ying. At the same time, Lu Ming's spear slashed down, using the second move of the 3 strikes of extinction, moon slashing. He used his divine skill and secret technique at the same time, and a terrifying attack rolled toward Lang Ying like a wave. Divine Eagle illuminates the world. Lang Ying let out a long cry. Feathers actually grew out of his skin, causing his divine eagle form to become even more powerful. The two exchanged blows in the void, and in the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged dozens of blows. Lang Ying is about to lose. Someone whispered. In the battle between Lang Ying and Lu Ming, Lang Ying had been at a disadvantage from the beginning to the end, and was suppressed by Lu Ming. His defeat was only a matter of time, and it would happen very quickly. Sure enough, Lang Ying managed to exchange dozens of blows with Lu Ming, and was struck by Lu Ming's spear. One of the wings of the divine eagle that he had transformed into collapsed. Lang Ying's face changed drastically, and he spurted out a mouthful of blood. Void piercing, void piercing. Lu Ming took the opportunity to launch a fierce attack, and dozens of terrifying spear radiances attacked Lang Ying. Each of these spear radiances was equivalent to the full power of Lu Ming's void piercing. If it wasn't for the continuous supply of divine force from the quantifying character art, Lu Ming wouldn't have been able to squander it like this. Rumble! After being struck by these spear radiances, Lang Ying's divine eagle completely collapsed, and his body was pierced through by a spear radiance. The spear radiance carried his body and landed on the star peak, nailing him to a rock. Lang Ying didn't die. This was Lu Ming being merciful. Otherwise, this spear would have taken his life. As a newcomer, Lu Ming didn't want to attract too much trouble. Many people were dumbfounded. They didn't expect Lang Ying to be defeated, and so miserably at that. As for the older members, their gazes were grave. Lu Ming had given them a lot of pressure. Lu Ming waved his hand, and the spear radiance on Lang Ying's body disappeared. Lang Ying fell to the ground, coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. His injuries were very serious, and he wouldn't be able to recover without 10 days to half a month. Now scram, Lu Ming said indifferently. Just you wait. Lang Ying spat out these words, and then staggered down the mountain. Now that he had been defeated and chased out of the courtyard, he no longer had the qualifications to fly in this area. He could only walk on his feet. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He stepped into the courtyard and swept his gaze over the place. The courtyard was very big and unique. Lu Ming liked it very much. Autumn Moon, stay here with me. Lu Ming walked out and said to Autumn Moon. According to the rules, the owner of the courtyard could invite several people to stay together. Yes, young master. Autumn Moon smiled. The other new members were envious. They envied Lu Ming for being able to stay on the Star Peak, and not at the foot of the mountain. Brother Wu Ming, brother Wu Yu, let's stay together. Lu Ming invited Wu Ming and Wu Yu. The courtyard was very big, and there were many rooms. It wouldn't be a problem for a few more people to stay together. We don't need it. We want to rely on our own strength in the future. Wu Ming smiled. That's right. Only by staying below will we have motivation. In fact, our Wu family also has other prodigies staying above, but if they come up directly, they won't have any pressure. Wu Yu said. That's good too. I'll wait for you up there. Lu Ming smiled, and didn't insist. He knew that Wu Ming and Wu Yu were right. Only by staying below would they have motivation. Chapter 2987. Lu Ming, Wu Ming, and Wu Yu chatted for a while. At this moment, an old man was watching them from afar. He's here, he's finally here. After so many years, he's finally here. Ha ha ha. The old man laughed loudly, his body trembling with excitement. After a while, the old man calmed down. Then, his eyes flickered a few times, and he took a step forward, disappearing from the place. Brother Lu, we'll take our leave then. Wu Yu and Wu Ming cupped their fists, intending to leave. Kid, it's you. At this moment, an angry roar was heard. Then, a few people stepped on the air and arrived above Lu Ming's head. A cold aura spread towards Lu Ming. People from the Qin clan and Jin Xing. Lu Ming looked around and saw a few familiar faces. Among them was Jin Xing, the one who was defeated by Lu Ming in the Qin Tian Starfield. There were a few young men beside Jin Xing. Two of them had scales between their eyebrows. Lu Ming knew at a glance that they were from the same clan as Qin Wuyo and Qin Wushang. These people could fly in the air, which meant that they also lived on the Star Peak. However, with Jin Xing's cultivation, it was impossible for him to live on the Star Peak. He should be living in someone else's garden. The few of them looked coldly at Lu Ming. Jin Xing. Is this the kid who killed my cousin Wuyo? One of the young men with scales between his eyebrows said coldly. That's right, it's him. He's the one who killed Qin Wuyo in the Qin Tian Starfield. Jin Xing pointed at Lu Ming. Very well. How dare you kill someone from the Qin clan? You're courting death. One of the sky prides of the Qin clan said coldly. He took a step forward and landed in front of Lu Ming. His cold aura kept pressuring towards Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming's expression did not change. Kid, now, I want to challenge you to a battle of life and death. The sky prides of the Qin clan said. I'm not free, no. Lu Ming directly refused. This genius of the Qin clan gave him an unfathomable feeling. To be honest, Lu Ming wasn't confident. Since he wasn't confident, why would Lu Ming fight? Not fighting? The Qin clan's heaven's favorite was startled. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Today, you have to fight even if you don't want to. After he finished speaking, a powerful aura rose from his body. A terrifying pressure covered the sky and the earth, spreading in all directions. Half-step Divine King Realm. Many people's expressions changed drastically. The genius of the Qin clan was a half-step Divine King. Lu Ming's expression stiffened slightly. Lu Ming was not afraid of ordinary half-step Divine Kings. He could easily crush them, such as the 9 great demon masters of the Devil Capital Mountain. However, the person in front of him wasn't an ordinary half-step Divine King. He was a peerless genius who controlled a divine-grade divine force. His battle prowess wasn't something ordinary people could compare to. If he was close to awakening his origin source divine force, his battle prowess would be even more shocking. Even if Lu Ming went all out, he might not be a match for him. However, if they were to fight, Lu Ming wasn't afraid. At most, he would go all out. If they were to fight to the death, Lu Ming could ignite his ancient god heart and definitely kill his opponent. Lu Ming's body also rose with a powerful battle intent. Wait a minute. At this moment, Wu Ming shouted. Do you have something to say? The genius of the Qin clan looked at Wu Ming coldly. I remember that there's a rule in the Starry Camp. If a new member challenges an old member of the Star Peak and takes away the other party's courtyard, they will be protected for 50 years. Within these 50 years, they can reject other people's challenges. Wu Ming said. That's right, there's such a rule. Indeed, this is to protect the new members of the heavenly talents. Some people also started to discuss. Although it was difficult for the new members to challenge the old members of the Star Peak, there were still some new members. There would be some terrifying geniuses among the new members who had a chance to succeed. For example, Lu Ming this time. Therefore, there was such a rule to protect the new members. The genius of the Qin clan, Jin Xing, and the rest obviously thought of this and their faces darkened. There's such a rule? Then hurry up and get lost. If you want to fight with me, come back after 50 years. Lu Ming waved his hand casually as if he was dismissing a beggar. Damn it! The genius of the Qin clan roared in his heart. He really wanted to slap Lu Ming to death. Unfortunately, he couldn't go against the rules of the Starry Camp. Kid, if you have the guts, accept my challenge. Don't be a coward. The genius of the Qin clan shouted coldly, hoping to provoke Lu Ming into accepting the challenge. However, Lu Ming wouldn't fall for such a low-level provocation. Sure, if you suppress your cultivation to the same level as mine, I'll accept your challenge. Lu Ming said with a smile. The genius of the Qin clan fell silent. What a joke. Suppress his cultivation to the same level as Lu Ming? Didn't you see how Lu Ming defeated Lang Ying when he was only a 4th-level heaven god? Suppressing his cultivation to the same level as Lu Ming was simply courting death. Why? Do you dare? If you don't talk nonsense here. How can you be considered a genius if you only know how to suppress others with your cultivation? You're more like a piece of trash. Lu Ming said coldly. You, the genius of the Qin clan, almost vomited blood. He couldn't insult Lu Ming and was the one being insulted instead. What about me? If you don't dare, hurry up and get lost. Don't disturb my cultivation. Lu Ming said in disdain. Lu Ming, how dare you? Right at this moment, Jin Xing roared. Lu Ming looked at Jin Xing in surprise. Lu Ming, you're from the Qin Tian Starfield. The people from the Qin Tian Starfield have stolen the treasure of the 9 Extinction Heavenly King Mansion, the 9 Extinction Divine Crystal. You're now a criminal. Why did you come to the Starry Camp? Do you have any ulterior motives? Jin Xing shouted with a cunning look in his eyes. The people from the Qin Tian Starfield. I didn't expect him to be from the Qin Tian Starfield. The people from the Qin Tian Starfield are indeed a criminal. Many people looked at Lu Ming unkindly when they heard that Lu Ming was from the Qin Tian Starfield. The 9 Extinction Heavenly King Mansion's treasure had been stolen and the target was the Qin Tian Starfield. Although the Qin Tian Starfield had been given 1,000 years' time, the people from the Qin Tian Starfield were still suspects. Lu Ming, you must have some ulterior motives to secretly join the Starry Camp. Tell me, are you the one who stole the treasure of the 9 Extinction Heavenly King Mansion? Jin Xing shouted coldly and put a big hat on Lu Ming. You're talking nonsense. Do you think I can steal the treasure from the 9 Extinction Heavenly King Mansion with my cultivation? Lu Ming's face was calm as he replied indifferently. That's easy. There must be someone in the 9 Extinction Heavenly King Mansion. Jin Xing's gaze turned and fell on Wu Ming and Wu Yu. He sneered and said, I suspect that the Wu family is your spy who helped you steal the 9 Extinction Divine Crystal. Wu Ming and Wu Yu's faces changed drastically after hearing this. Jin Xing's words were malicious. He was trying to kill the Wu family. Jin Xing, you're talking nonsense. You need evidence to prove your words. If you're so capable, why don't you show us the evidence? Wu Ming and Wu Yu shouted. Chapter 2988. Jin Xing actually accused Lu Ming of colluding with the Wu family to steal the 9 Ju Divine Crystal. This was a serious crime. Wu Yu and Wu Ming immediately shouted, asking Jin Xing to take out the evidence if he had the ability. Why do we need evidence? The truth is right in front of us. Why do we need evidence? Jin Xing sneered and continued to accuse. Hee, you want to convict me with just your mouth? How laughable is that? Lu Ming said and looked at Jin Xing with disdain. He smiled evilly and said, Since you insist that I stole the treasure, then fine. I admit that it was the Jin family and Qin family who ordered me to do it. The Jin family and Qin family want to rebel. As soon as he said that, the faces of the Jin family and Qin family changed. Bullshit, you're bullshitting. Nonsense. No one will believe a single word you say. Jin Xing and Qin Tian's geniuses roared. If you can say it, why can't I say it? Since you said that I'm suspected of stealing the treasure, then I'll expose you guys for colluding with me. What's suspicious about that? That's normal. Otherwise, how could I steal the treasure? Lu Ming said indifferently. You. Lu Ming, damn it, Jin Xing roared, but he couldn't find any words to refute Lu Ming. If he continued to accuse Lu Ming of coming to the Starry Camp with bad intentions and having something to do with the theft of the 9-Ju divine crystal, then Lu Ming would insist that the Jin family and Qin Tian were their helpers. Since there was no evidence, he could just rely on his mouth. Jin Xing's face turned green and white. In the end, he didn't dare to say anything. The 9-Ju Heavenly King Mansion wasn't just one family, but many ancient families. These families worked together under the 9-Ju Heavenly King Mansion, but they were competitors and attacked each other. He was afraid that if he continued to suppress Lu Ming would say anything. It wouldn't be good if the rival families attacked them. Lu Ming, then you can continue to hide. Let's see how long you can hide. The protection period here is only 50 years. Jin Xing snorted coldly. You talk too much. Come, let's fight at the same level. If you don't fight, then you're a bastard. Lu Ming gestured with his middle finger. Humph. The geniuses of the Jin clan and Qin clan snorted coldly and turned to leave. Brother Lu, you still have to be careful in the future. The Jin family and Qin family have great influence in the 9-extinction Heavenly King Mansion. Wu Ming warned. Don't worry. Lu Ming smiled. Then, Wu Ming and Wu Yu bid farewell and left. Lu Ming and Qiu Yu walked into the courtyard and closed the door. The courtyard was very large. There was a courtyard, a pavilion, and 7 or 8 rooms. The two of them each chose a room. Lu Ming walked into the room and sat down cross-legged. He could feel a strange fluctuation coming from the top of the star peak. This wave of energy could clear one's mind and speed up one's comprehension of divine skills and secret techniques. However, Lu Ming was not in the mood to comprehend the divine skills and secret techniques. He was thinking about the origin divine force factor. There should be a place to store books in the Starry Camp. There should also be a place to buy divine skills and secret techniques. Let's go and take a look. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He then stood up and left the room. He soared into the sky and observed from afar. On the star peak, other than many residences, there were also many majestic palaces. From afar, Lu Ming saw a palace with people going in and out. It was very lively. Lu Ming flew towards that palace. When he arrived, he realized that it was a market with people coming and going. It was very lively. Immediately, Lu Ming bought a map of the Starry Camp. On the map, some of the important places in the Starry Camp were marked out. There is indeed a scripture depository. Let's go and take a look. Lu Ming followed the mark on the map and flew over. Soon, Lu Ming saw a majestic palace. Above the door, there were 3 big words. Scripture depository. At the door, there was a white-haired old man guarding it. You can stay on the first floor and read freely. You can only buy anything from the 2nd floor and above. The old man said calmly. Thank you, senior. Lu Ming cupped his fists and walked in. The 1st floor was extremely spacious. At a glance, it was filled with books and classics. Lu Ming casually flipped through the books. He realized that the 1st floor wasn't filled with secret manuals of divine techniques or secret manuals of divine skills. Instead, it was filled with miscellaneous books. For example, there were books that recorded various desolate beasts, various strange stories, introductions to the local customs of different star regions, the history of the Taishu dynasty, etc. No wonder he could casually flip through the books. Lu Ming took a glance. Divine Power Biography. Suddenly, a book attracted Lu Ming's attention. Lu Ming immediately flipped through the book. The first part introduced the basic knowledge of divine power. Lu Ming knew all about it and skipped it. At the back, it introduced the origin divine power factor. Most of it was similar to what Wu Ming and Wu Yu said. However, it was more detailed in this part. For divine grade divine power, as one's comprehension and usage deepened, one would be able to awaken the origin divine power factor. However, before the origin divine power factor was awakened, there was a process called the awakening level.
For example, Lang Ying and the others who lived on the mountainside of the Star Peak had entered this level and were not far from the awakening level. Of course, there was a difference between not far and not far. For some people, the awakening level was 10%, while for others, it was 20%. Only when the awakening level reached 100% would the origin divine power factor be truly awakened. The higher the awakening level, the stronger the divine power would be. I wonder what's Lang Ying's awakening level. According to this record, it should be less than 50%. Lu Ming pondered. Then, he thought of himself. He was afraid that he hadn't even awakened 10% of the sovereign's divine power. As for the undying sword force, it was even worse. Seems like I have to spend more time on divine power in the future. Lu Ming pondered and continued reading. The more he read, the more Lu Ming sighed. It turned out that the awakening of the origin divine power was just the beginning. It was only the awakening of the origin divine power factor. It was still far from the divine power that the primitive divine spirits had during the incipient God era. The origin divine power factor that he had just awakened was only the first level. In the future, it could be awakened a second time, a third time. After the second awakening, it would be the second level of the origin divine power factor. After the third awakening, it would be the third level of the origin divine power factor. Every time he awakened, it was extremely difficult, and only 1 in a million could awaken. Every time he awakened, his divine power would transform and become even stronger. It could even give birth to secret techniques of the origin. Every time the origin secret art was awakened, it was possible that the origin secret art would be different, and its prowess would be greater than that of ordinary origin secret arts. No one knew how many times the origin divine power factor could be awakened. According to the legends, the highest number of awakenings was 9 times. At that time, the divine power would have transformed to an extremely terrifying level. It was absolutely equal to the true origin divine power with endless power. However, those who could reach that level were the real peak existences in the primitive universe. They were the characters who could move unhindered in the universe. One kind of divine power has so many mysteries. Its potential is endless. Lu Ming exclaimed. Chapter 2989. Looking at the introduction of the origin God force factor, Lu Ming was even more determined to focus on cultivating divine grade God force, merging the king grade God force and divine grade God force in his body. Let's go up a few floors and see if there are any divine grade God force techniques that are similar to my saint grade God force and king grade God force attributes. Lu Ming muttered to himself. He left the first floor and walked up the stairs to the second floor. The second floor was filled with divine skill secret manuals. However, there were restrictions placed on each divine skill secret manual. Lu Ming picked one up and flipped through it. He realized that he could only flip through the first 2 pages, which contained a simple introduction of the divine skill. As for the rest of the divine skill secret manual, he couldn't flip through it. If he wanted to read the rest of the divine skill secret manual, he could only buy it and ask the expert guarding the place to open the restrictions for him. Let's see if I can find a suitable divine skill secret manual. Lu Ming's heart suddenly moved. The 9 heavens Garuda art that he cultivated was incomplete. The highest level he could reach was the 7th level. Now, he had cultivated it to the peak. Now, he wanted to find a divine skill secret manual that he could cultivate to a higher level. As for the offensive and defensive divine techniques, there were a total of 9 levels of the apocalyptic 3 strikes and the 9-layered crimson gold armor. It was enough for Lu Ming to cultivate for a period of time. Ordinary cultivators would only be able to cultivate to the 9th level after reaching the God King realm. Thus, it wasn't easy to cultivate to the 9th level. These 2 divine skills secret manuals didn't need to be changed for the time being. Lu Ming walked around the second floor, his gaze sweeping through the divine skill secret manual. Not long after, Lu Ming's eyes lit up. 9 heavens Garuda art. There is actually the 9 heavens Garuda art here. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. He actually saw a divine skill secret manual, the 9 heavens Garuda art. Lu Ming quickly picked it up and flipped through it. Of course, he could only flip through the first 2 pages, which was the introduction of the 9 heavens Garuda art. 13th level, this is the complete 9 heavens Garuda art. It can be cultivated to the 13th level. Lu Ming was overjoyed. Needless to say, Lu Ming would definitely buy this 9 heavens Kuan Peng technique. If he were to purchase other speed-type divine skills, Lu Ming would have to start from the first level again. However, if he were to cultivate the Garuda art, Lu Ming could directly start from the 7th level. Lu Ming put away the 9 Heavens Garuda technique manual with satisfaction, and then he walked towards the 3rd floor. The 3rd floor was filled with all kinds of divine arts. Moreover, they were all divine-grade divine arts. When cultivated to the peak, one would be able to cultivate divine-grade divine power. There were over 100 of them. Lu Ming's eyes burned with passion. There were more than 100 kinds of divine-grade techniques, and each of them could cultivate a different kind of divine-grade divine power. Lu Ming's heart was thumping wildly at the thought of it. He had the universe myriad Tao arts, so he could cultivate a lot of divine powers. If he could successfully cultivate so many divine arts, then wouldn't he be able to control hundreds of divine-grade divine powers? Lu Ming's eyes were filled with greed. Calm down, calm down. Lu Ming took a deep breath and calmed himself down. If it was in the past, he would have really wanted to cultivate so many divine-grade divine powers. However, he had changed his mind. Every type of divine-grade divine power had endless potential and could continuously awaken the origin divine power factor. Therefore, although he could cultivate many types of divine powers, he did not have the energy to awaken the origin divine power factor. Therefore, he did not plan to cultivate too many types for the time being. He only wanted to cultivate divine powers that were similar to the divine grade and royal grade divine powers in his body. When he had the chance in the future, he would cultivate more divine powers. After calming down, Lu Ming began to search. Currently, he had a total of 10 types of divine powers in his body. There were 3 royal grade divine powers: the frost divine power from the cold ice divine art, the great sun divine power from the great sun divine art, and the golden dragon divine art from the golden dragon divine art. There were also 5 divine grade divine powers: the extreme cold divine art from the extreme cold divine art, the profound divine art from the profound divine art, the multi-eyed divine art from the multi-eyed divine art, the heavenly wind divine art from the heavenly wind divine art, and the 9 evils divine art from the 9 evils divine art. The last 2 were divine grade divine powers: the sovereign divine power and the inextinguishable sword force. Among these divine powers, the frost divine power and the extreme cold divine power had similar attributes. As long as he could find a divine grade cultivation technique with the cold attribute and cultivate it successfully, he would be able to merge them. As for the royal grade and saint grade divine powers, he would have to find a similar divine grade cultivation technique to cultivate. Lu Ming searched carefully. Not long after, Lu Ming found 2 techniques that satisfied Lu Ming. The Great Moon Divine Art, when cultivated to the peak, would allow one to cultivate the Great Moon Divine Power with the cold attribute. If one could awaken the origin divine power, it would be even more terrifying. This was an extremely ancient divine power. The Great Sun Divine Art, when cultivated to the peak, would allow one to cultivate the Great Sun Divine Power with the Yang attribute. This was also an extremely ancient divine power that corresponded to the Great Moon Divine Power. These are the 2 techniques. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He put away the 2 divine techniques and continued his search. Not long after, Lu Ming found a few more techniques. The Wind Annihilation Divine Art's Wind Annihilation Divine Art was a divine grade divine power, which corresponded to the Heavenly Wind Divine Power. The Heavenly Evil Divine Art's Heavenly Evil Divine Power was also a divine grade divine power, which corresponded to the 9 Evils Divine Power. The Profound Sky Divine Art's Profound Sky Divine Art was also a divine grade divine power, which corresponded to the Profound Sky Divine Power. However, it was a pity that Lu Ming could not find a divine grade cultivation technique that corresponded to the Golden Dragon Divine Power and the Multi-Vision Divine Art. I'll buy these 5 techniques first. I'll think of a way to get the other 2 later. Lu Ming pondered for a while. After putting away these magical skills, he headed to the 1st floor. He arrived at the entrance. What do you want to buy? Let this old man first remind you that the things inside have restrictions. If I don't remove the restrictions, you won't be able to bring them out. The old man reminded him. Junior understands. Junior wants to buy these. Lu Ming took out the 9 Heavens Kuan Peng technique and the 5 divine grade techniques. You want to buy so many divine grade cultivation techniques? Little brat, 1 person is enough, don't you understand? The old man's eyes widened as he looked at Lu Ming in surprise. Senior has misunderstood. Junior is not buying for himself. Junior comes from a small place that lacks divine grade cultivation techniques. Junior is buying them for his friends. Lu Ming casually came up with an excuse. I see. The old man nodded, not suspecting anything. It was normal to buy for one's friends and family. However, the price of a divine-grade cultivation technique is very high. One manual is. The old man then reported the total price of the 5 divine-grade cultivation techniques and the 9 heavens Garuda art. After hearing the price, Lu Ming sucked in a breath of cold air. 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. The total price was 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. High-grade divine crystals were used by God King realm experts to cultivate. Chapter 2990. 100,000 high-grade divine crystals were equivalent to 10 billion mid-grade divine crystals. As for how many low-grade divine crystals were equivalent to, it was practically impossible to calculate. It was an astronomical figure. Lu Ming was stunned when he heard this number. The old man also looked at Lu Ming with a smile. Even a low-level divine king would not be able to pay such a price. He concluded that Lu Ming definitely could not take out so many divine crystals. Sigh, what a pity. I can't buy the first level directly. Lu Ming sighed in his heart. Actually, he only needed to buy the first level of these divine techniques. However, there was a rule here. If he wanted to buy, he could only buy the entire set. After sighing for a while, Lu Ming took out several storage rings and fiddled with them. Then, he handed a storage ring to the old man. Senior, the low-grade divine crystals, mid-grade divine crystals, and high-grade divine crystals in here add up to 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. Lu Ming said. You really have so many divine crystals? The old man was skeptical. Then, he took Lu Ming's storage ring and scanned it with his spiritual sense. He was immediately stunned. The space within the storage ring was filled with divine crystals. There were mountains of low-grade divine crystals and mid-grade divine crystals. There was also a portion of high-grade divine crystals. An ordinary person would not have been able to count them. However, with the old man's powerful spiritual sense, he could count them clearly in a few breaths. These divine crystals added up to 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. Kid, you're incredible. You really can take out 100,000 high-grade divine crystals. The old man sighed in amazement. Lu Ming lamented in his heart. If he had not killed the Dark Knight Demon King and obtained his storage ring, he would not have been able to take out so many divine crystals. After all, the Dark Knight Demon King had so many divine crystals because he was sitting on the demonic night spring. Even so, after paying such a sum of divine crystals, Lu Ming did not have many left. Since you've paid the divine crystals, these divine techniques are yours. I'll remove the seals on them for you. The old man said. Then, he formed hand seals with both hands. Runes flew into the manual. The manual flickered a few times before stabilizing. All right, the restriction on it has been broken. Take it. The old man said. Thank you, senior. Lu Ming cupped his fists. Then, he took the secret book and put it into his storage ring. After that, he hurriedly returned to his residence. Mid-Autumn Moon. After returning to his residence, Lu Ming walked into Autumn Moon's room. Young master, what's wrong? Autumn Moon ended her cultivation and blinked her eyes at Lu Ming. Xueqi, how's your cultivation of the saint-grade divine techniques that I gave you before? Lu Ming asked. They've all succeeded. They've already condensed divine flames. Autumn Moon said. So fast. Lu Ming was speechless. Fortunately, the divine techniques that Autumn Moon cultivated were the same as Lu Ming's. Autumn Moon, I've bought some divine-grade divine arts. Take 2 of them and cultivate them first. After you've successfully cultivated them, integrate the saint-grade divine power with the divine-grade divine power. Lu Ming took out a few divine-grade divine arts and gave them to Autumn Moon. Divine-grade divine arts. Autumn Moon's eyes lit up. Then, she took 2 of them. Then, Lu Ming returned to his room and took out a divine art, Sun Yin divine art, and began to read it. It was indeed difficult to cultivate a divine-grade divine art. However, Lu Ming already had a lot of experience. In addition, his comprehension had increased a lot on the Star Peak. Thus, it wasn't too difficult for him to cultivate it. A few months later, Lu Ming cultivated the first level of the Sun Yin divine art and successfully cultivated a strand of Sun Yin divine power. Then, Lu Ming changed to the Universe Myriad Dao technique. He continued to strengthen this strand of Sun Yin divine power until he condensed divine flames. Just like that, a year passed. When the divine power was strong enough, Lu Ming's energy center lit up another divine flame. This was the Sun Yin divine flame. This was also because the cultivation environment in the starry camp was too good. In other places, it wouldn't be so fast. Now, I can integrate the ice divine power and absolute chill divine power into the sun yin divine power. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. He began to control the two divine flames and merged them with the sun yin divine flame. Their attributes were similar and the sun yin divine flame was of a higher grade. It was relatively easy to merge them. A few months later, the ice divine power and absolute chill divine power had completely merged with the sun yin divine flame. The sun yin divine flame had grown a lot stronger. However, compared to the divine flames formed by the sovereign divine power and the indestructible sword force, it was still a long way off. It needed time to grow stronger. In this way, Lu Ming only had 9 divine flames left in his energy center. I wonder how Autumn Moon's cultivation is going. Let's go take a look. Lu Ming walked out of his room and saw Autumn Moon cultivating a divine art in the courtyard. When he saw Lu Ming, Autumn Moon stopped cultivating. Autumn Moon, how's your cultivation of the 2 divine grade divine arts going? Lu Ming asked with a smile. I finished cultivating them a few months ago. Autumn Moon said. What? You finished cultivating them? You finished fusing the divine flames? Lu Ming was shocked. Yes, I finished them. Autumn Moon said. Lu Ming received a huge blow. He had been cultivating non-stop and had only managed to cultivate 1. However, Autumn Moon had already cultivated 2. This was really a blow to him. Autumn Moon, take these and cultivate. Lu Ming gave the remaining 3 divine arts to Autumn Moon. Autumn Moon returned the 2 to Lu Ming. The 2 chatted for a while before returning to their respective rooms to continue cultivating. Time passed quickly. Lu Ming had been in the starry camp for 10 years. During this time, Lu Ming had successfully cultivated all the divine grade divine arts and fused them with the divine powers of similar attributes. Now, Lu Ming only had 9 divine flames and 9 divine powers left in his energy center. 7 of them were divine grade divine powers. They were the ruler divine powers, undying sword force, sun divine powers, moon divine powers, profound heaven divine powers, wind destruction divine powers, and heavenly evil divine powers. There was also a saint grade divine powers, multivision divine powers, and a king grade divine powers, golden dragon divine powers. Of the 7 divine grade divine powers, only the ruler divine powers and undying sword force were full. They were at 4th layer heavenly god realm. The other 5 divine grade divine powers were only at 1st layer heavenly god realm. They were still far from being full. Although the saint grade divine powers and king grade divine powers were full before they were fused, they were far from being full once they were converted into divine grade divine powers. Even so, Lu Ming's overall battle strength had increased by a notch. After all, they were all divine grade divine powers. Each of them was shockingly powerful. If all the divine powers were full, Lu Ming's battle strength would skyrocket. At that time, even if his cultivation did not increase, he would be able to crush geniuses like Lung Ying. That being said, it was extremely difficult to cultivate all 5 divine grade divine powers to full. For example, it would take a long time for a person to reach 4th layer heavenly god realm from 1st layer heavenly god realm. Besides, Lu Ming was equivalent to 5 people. Chapter 2991. The Universe Myriad Daos technique has its pros and cons. He can control many kinds of divine grade divine force and is indeed powerful, but the resources and time required for cultivation are much more than others. Unfortunately, the refinement speed of the stellar core is too slow. If there is energy from the stellar core, I can quickly cultivate all 5 kinds of divine grade divine force to the fullest state. Lu Ming muttered. Hey, kid, are you blaming me for the slow refinement speed? Lu Ming's words were heard by the quantifying formula, and it immediately shouted. No. Lu Ming quickly denied. Kid, it's all because your cultivation is too weak. Too weak. Do you understand? It's simply too weak. Heavenly God realm, hee hee. The quantifying formula sneered with great resentment. Lu Ming's face was covered in cold sweat. The quantifying formula muttered again, scolding Lu Ming. After a long while it stopped. Kid, let me tell you, it's not impossible to quickly refine the energy of the stellar core. After scolding, the quantifying formula suddenly changed the topic. What's the way? Lu Ming's eyes lit up. Without the help of the stellar core, Lu Ming could cultivate all 5 kinds of divine force to the fullest state without the help of the stellar core. It would take him at least tens of thousands of years to cultivate all 5 kinds of divine force to the fullest state even on the star peak.
Tens of thousands of years. By that time it would be too late. It's very simple. The stellar core is extreme yang.
If you can find a kind of extreme yin and cold object for me to absorb and merge with the yin and yang, I can quickly refine the stellar core into energy.
The quantifying formula said. Extreme yin and cold? Does the cold moonstone count? Lu Ming said. No, the cold moonstone's level is too low. The cold liquid in your 9th ice chain can do it. The quantifying formula said. That liquid. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat.
However, he had already refined it and turned it into a supernatural power.
It would definitely not work. Then, Lu Ming thought of the Ice Soul Race's treasure, the Ice Jade Heart Chill. However, the Ice Jade Heart was the most precious treasure of the Ice Soul clan. It was impossible for him to refine and absorb it. Let's go to the Starry Sky Camp Market and take a look. Lu Ming muttered before leaving the room and heading towards the market square of the Universal Camp. Unfortunately, in the market of the Starry Sky Camp, although some cold attribute treasures were found, they did not meet the requirements. One had to know that it was the core of a star. It was very difficult to find an item of extreme coldness that matched it. For the next few days, Lu Ming went in and out of the market square. Unfortunately, there was no harvest. Lu Ming could only rely on himself to slowly cultivate. Lu Ming cultivated the Universe Myriad Tao technique, accumulating divine power while cultivating various divine skills. He realized that the complete version of the 9 Heavens Kuan-Peng technique was even more mysterious than the incomplete version. Especially after the 7th level, it was simply a lot more mysterious. After cultivating it, he would truly have the might of the Kuan-Peng, able to fly for 100,000 miles with a flap of his wings. Lu Ming, get your ass out here and fight me. On this day, Lu Ming was cultivating. Suddenly, a loud roar came from outside. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. He extended his spiritual awareness and found a young man standing in mid-air. His eyes were like lightning. Lu Ming had never seen this young man before. It seems like the Jin clan and Qin clan can't hold back anymore. Lu Ming thought for a while before saying, "It hasn't been 50 years yet. I won't fight." Lu Ming rejected without hesitation. "Humph, Lu Ming, what kind of supreme talent are you? You only know how to hide like a turtle. You don't even dare to accept a challenge. I think you should get out of the Starry Sky Camp." The young man shouted coldly, full of disdain. "Is that so? Fine. Suppress your cultivation to the same level as mine and I will fight you." Lu Ming's voice sounded. "Humph." The young man snorted and did not reply. "Why aren't you talking? You don't even dare to accept a challenge from someone of the same level. What kind of supreme talent are you? You only know how to hide like a turtle. I think you should get out of the Starry Sky Camp." Lu Ming's disdainful voice sounded. "You." The young man was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Lu Ming returned his words to him. In the end, the young man could only leave with his tail between his legs. However, in less than a month, another young man came to challenge Lu Ming. He used all kinds of provocations and slanderous words. However, Lu Ming always said, "Do you dare to accept a challenge from someone of the same level?" Then, those people left with their tails between their legs. Are these people really sent by the Jin clan and Qin clan? After being challenged continuously, Lu Ming had some doubts. If it was the Jin clan and Qin clan, it would be enough to challenge him once or twice. However, this was already 4 or 5 times. Lu Ming could not help but think of the assassination attempt on his way to the Starry Sky Camp. Who was the one who sent them? Also, wasn't the 9 Extinction Heavenly King residents behind the Demon Capital Mountain? How could they be eliminated by the Starry Sky Camp as a test for the newcomers? Could it be that the person who gave the test to the newcomers was the backer of the Demon Capital Mountain? The other party wanted to eliminate the Demon Capital Mountain and destroy the evidence? This was very possible. If that was the case, the Dark Knight Devil King would definitely have evidence in his hands. Therefore, Lu Ming was assassinated on his way to the Starry Sky Camp. Among the people who challenged him, there might be someone sent by the other party who wanted to kill him and take away the evidence in his hands. The more Lu Ming thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. However, it was impossible to investigate from the person who gave the test to the newcomers. Lu Ming had already asked Wu Ming and Wu Yu about this. The person who gave the test was an ordinary elder of the Starry Sky Camp.
It was obvious that the other party would not give the order personally. It would be very difficult to investigate through special means. Lu Ming moved his hand and the Dark Knight Devil King's storage ring appeared in his hand. If there was evidence, it would definitely be in the storage ring. However, Lu Ming looked through it a few times and found nothing. Let's look at it again. Lu Ming continued to look through it, but he still found nothing. Clang, clang, clang. At this moment, the sound of a bell could be heard from the Star Peak. What happened? Lu Ming was curious and walked out of the room with Autumn Moon. Star Crescent Ancient City will open in 10 days. Those who want to enter and try their luck, gather at the plaza at the foot of the mountain in 10 days. A voice came from the top of the Star Peak and spread throughout the Starry Sky Camp. Everyone could hear it. Star Crescent Ancient City is opening again. This time I must go in. I must awaken the Origin God Force factor. Haha, this is my opportunity. Instantly, the Starry Sky Camp became noisy. Many of the senior members were excited. Star Crescent Ancient City? What is that? Is it a historical site? Lu Ming and Autumn Moon were puzzled. Let's ask Wu Ming and Wu Yu. Autumn Moon said. Alright. Lu Ming nodded. Then, he and Autumn Moon flew towards the foot of the mountain. Soon, the two of them arrived at the foot of the mountain. A disgusting smell could be smelled. At this moment, the members of the Starry Sky Camp at the foot of the mountain had left their wooden houses and were discussing the Star Crescent Ancient City. When they saw Lu Ming and Autumn Moon, they all looked at them with envy. Chapter 2992. One day, I'll kill my way up there and fly openly. Me too. Many people clenched their fists and looked at Lu Ming enviously. Living on the Star Peak without any stench and being able to fly freely had become the goal of these people. Lu Ming ignored them. Soon, they found Wu Ming and Wu Yu. Brother Lu, Miss Autumn Moon, why are you here? Wu Ming and Wu Yu said with a smile. After not seeing each other for more than 10 years, Wu Ming and Wu Yu's cultivation had improved significantly. They were not far from reaching the 9th layer Heaven God realm. Brother Wu, I'm here to ask you about the Star Crescent Ancient City. Lu Ming said with a smile. I see. It's because of the Star Crescent Ancient City. We don't know much about it, but we do know that the Star Crescent Ancient City is an ancient ruin. Legend has it that it was left behind from the early days of the Heavenly Palace era. It contains all kinds of fortunate encounters. It's said that every time someone goes there, they will find something there. Someone even managed to awaken the Origin God Force factor. Wu Ming explained. His eyes flickered passionately as he spoke. An ancient ruin from the early days of the Heavenly Palace era. Lu Ming was shocked too. Now, it was considered the late days of the Heavenly Palace era. It was unknown how long it had been since the early days of the Heavenly Palace era. I heard that there are all kinds of forbidden areas there that contain treasures. Wu Yu added. Oh, did anyone find any frost-type treasures there? Lu Ming asked. Yes, I heard that there's a forbidden area there that contains frost-type treasures. Wu Yu said. Lu Ming's eyes flickered slightly. If he could find some frost-type treasures in the Star Crescent Ancient City, it would greatly increase his cultivation speed. He must go to the Star Crescent Ancient City. Cultivating step by step was too slow. He could only improve faster by going on adventures. After chatting with Wu Ming and Wu Yu for a while, Lu Ming and Autumn Moon returned to their residence. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. 10 days later, the square at the foot of the mountain was crowded with people. Most of the prodigies of the Starry Camp had arrived. Of course, there was a limit to entering the Star Crescent Ancient City. Those above the Divine King realm were not allowed to enter. The highest level that could enter was a half-step Divine King realm. Lu Ming. Wu Ming and Wu Yu walked towards Lu Ming and Autumn Moon. Beside them were a few young men and women, all of whom had extraordinary auras. Wu Ming introduced the young men and women. They were all geniuses of the Wu clan. They cultivated on the Star Peak and their cultivation bases were below the Divine King realm. They greeted each other and got to know each other. He's here. Suddenly, someone spoke and looked in the direction of the Star Peak. A ray of light flew over from the top of the Starry Peak. It was a white-haired old man who stood in the air above the square. His body exuded a vast and unfathomable aura. It was hard to tell what cultivation level he was at. My name is Bai Li. You can call me Elder Bai. The white-haired old man said.
Greetings, Elder Bai. Many people bowed. The experts in charge of the Starry Camp were all sent by the 9 Extinction Heavenly King Palace. They were the direct descendants of the 9 Extinction Heavenly King and did not belong to any of the clans. You're all going to enter the Starry Crescent Ancient City, right? First of all, let me remind you that it's very dangerous to enter the Starry Crescent Ancient City. You can lose your life at any time. You'd better think carefully. Bai Li warned seriously. However, no one said a word. Of course, there would be danger when taking risks and looking for opportunities. If they did not dare to go when there was danger, then what was the point of cultivating? They would definitely be left behind by the other geniuses. Bai Li was expressionless as he continued. Most importantly, those who will enter the Starry Crescent Ancient City will not only be the geniuses of the 9 Extinction Heavenly King Palace but also the geniuses of the other Heavenly King Palaces. There are a total of 4 Heavenly King Palaces that have the path to the Starry Crescent Ancient City. They will also enter. As soon as he said that, many of the new members were shocked. However, the old members seemed to have known about it and were not surprised. The other Heavenly King Palaces will also enter. Many people whispered and their eyes became serious. In the Taishu dynasty, there were a total of 27 Heavenly Kings guarding the various territories. Each Heavenly King Palace was like a country within a country, managing a large area of territory. These Heavenly Kings' palaces did not get along well with each other. Instead, they competed with each other and even attacked each other as if they were 2 different countries. Some of the Heavenly Kings' palaces even had irreconcilable enmity with each other and would kill each other whenever they met. Therefore, if the geniuses of the other Heavenly Kings' palaces entered the Starry Crescent Ancient City, the danger would greatly increase. Alright, that's all for now. Is there anyone else who wants to withdraw? It's not too late to withdraw now. Bai Li said. No one withdrew. Alright, since no one wants to withdraw, then follow me. I'll allow you to fly. Bai Li said and then flew out of the Starry Crescent camp. Everyone rose into the air and followed Bai Li. After flying for half an hour, they arrived at a secret place. The space there was very strange. It seemed to be shrinking in one direction and in that direction, there was a dark hole. Could that be a wormhole? Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. Lu Ming had seen records of wormholes in some ancient books. Most wormholes appeared naturally after the birth of the universe. Wormholes were extremely mysterious. Different wormholes in the universe would connect with each other. After entering a wormhole, one would appear in another place in the universe. Perhaps, in an instant, one would be transported from one starfield to another. Wormholes were different from teleportation portals. Teleportation portals were man-made. When teleporting, it was actually crossing the void just like a void passage. It also needed time. For example, inter-starfield teleportation would take a lot of time. However, wormholes did not need that time. In an instant, one could go from one starfield to another starfield or even further away. Could it be that one had to go through this wormhole to enter the Starry Crescent Ancient City? Let's go! Bai Li took the lead and flew into the wormhole. In a flash, his figure disappeared. Then, the old members followed and flew into the wormhole. Let's go too! A young man from the Wu family said and flew forward. Lu Ming, Qiu Yu, and the rest also entered the wormhole. As soon as Lu Ming entered the wormhole, he was enveloped by a mysterious force. He seemed to see a passage in the void that led to the front. Then, his figure flashed and completely disappeared. In the next moment, his body became lighter and the force disappeared. This is... Lu Ming realized that he was standing on a piece of land. When he looked back, there was also a wormhole behind them. This wormhole was connected to the wormhole in the Starry Crescent camp. If they wanted to go back, they could directly enter this wormhole and return to the Starry Crescent camp. Then, Lu Ming looked around. They were standing on a very flat piece of land. In front of them, there was a majestic ancient city that stood between heaven and earth. Chapter 2993. It was an ancient city that was incomparably huge. It looked like an ancient beast that was crawling on the ground. The city walls towered into the clouds. From afar, one could not tell how big the city was because they could not see the edge of the city walls. It was as if they could only see one side of the city walls but not the other side. Star Crescent Ancient City. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Let's go! Bai Li flew forward and the others followed closely behind.
As they got closer to the city walls, they realized that the city walls were huge and ancient. It was filled with the aura of time as if it had traveled through time and space from the beginning of the universe. Soon, they arrived at the foot of the city walls and discovered that there was a gate at the foot of the city walls. No, to be precise, there were 4 gates. Behind the 4 gates was a common passage that led into the city. The 4 gates were different from each other. The gate on the far left was the largest. It was dazzling and had a noble aura. The second gate from the left was silver white and crystal clear. Although it was not as good as the first gate, it was not bad. The third gate was an ordinary stone gate. As for the fourth gate, it was no longer a gate. It was a hole that could only fit 1 person. You should have seen these 4 gates. If you want to enter Star Crescent Ancient City, you have to go through these 4 gates. Bai Li pointed at the 4 gates and said, "Can't we just fly in from the top of the city walls?" A new member asked. "Hee, if you're not afraid of death, you can give it a try." An old member sneered. Suddenly, the new member's expression changed. "There are powerful restrictions on the top of the city walls. Even those above the godly king realm will die if they go up there." Bai Li said indifferently. Everyone gasped. Those above the godly king realm would also die if they went up there. The restrictions were too terrifying. Then the crowd looked at the 4 doors. Did these 4 doors also have something special about them? Sure enough, Bai Li continued to explain. There are restrictions on these 4 gates as well. Those above the godly king realm cannot enter. Only those below the godly king realm can enter. These 4 gates, from left to right, are the Heaven Gate, Earth Gate, Human Gate, and Dog Gate. Bai Li paused when he said that. Heaven Gate, Earth Gate, Human Gate, Dog Gate? Everyone's eyes flickered. As the name implied, among the 4 gates, the Gate of Heaven was the most honorable, while the Gate of Dog was the worst. Most people's eyes fell on the Gate of Heaven. If he wanted to leave, he naturally had to go through the Heavenly Gate. However, no one noticed that many of the older members had complicated expressions on their faces. Some of them even quietly stepped back, indicating that they should go first. Bai Li smiled and said, "As the name suggests, the Heavenly Gate is the most honorable, followed by the Earth Gate. But let me tell you, there is a terrifying restriction on the gate that can test one's talent. The more talented one is, the better they can pass through the honorable gate. If one's talent is insufficient and tries to force their way through, they will be killed. Do you understand? You must act according to your capabilities." A fatal disaster. Many of the new members were bewildered. They looked at the old members, but most of the old members stepped back slightly, with an expression that said, "You go first." "Looks like this door won't be easy to pass." Lu Ming mumbled. If it was easy to leave, those old members would have already left. "With my talent, I'll surely pass through the Gate of Heaven." At this moment, a young man in black stepped out and walked towards the Heaven's Gate. His face was full of confidence. It was obvious that the man was very confident in his talent. Bai Li's eyes flickered, but he did not stop the young man. Everyone's attention was fixed on the young man in a black robe. The difference was that the new members were curious, while the old members were waiting for a good show. Bang! Bang! Even though the young man in a black robe was confident, he did not dare to be careless. He unleashed his God force, encapsulating his body within it. 9th layer Heaven God Realm. Many people could tell that the young man's cultivation had reached the 9th layer Heaven God Realm. Every step he took was cautious, as if he was on alert. Finally, he stepped into the Gate of Heaven. However, there was no reaction from the Gate of Heaven. The young man in a black robe took a few more steps, but nothing happened. The confidence on his face grew thicker. "It seems like my talent is good enough." The black-shirt young man smiled and continued to walk forward. However, when he was halfway to the door, his figure suddenly came to a stop. He stood there motionlessly. What's going on? Why did he stop moving? Many people were confused. "The trial has begun," Bai Li said. As soon as Bai Li finished his sentence, the young man in a black robe began to tremble vigorously. He let out a cry of agony and was knocked flying out of the Gate of Heaven. He slammed heavily onto the ground and stopped moving. There was no sign of life on his body. He was dead. The young man in a black robe was dead. The crowd discovered a bloody wound on the young man's forehead. It was a fatal wound. His soul had been destroyed. Many people gasped. They did not see how the young man in a black robe died.
What exactly happened in the gate of heaven? Let me tell you, the 4 gates have nothing to do with your cultivation, only your talent. If your talent isn't good enough, you will either die or be severely injured. You should think carefully about which gate you choose. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the last gate won't be stopped.
As long as your cultivation is below the God Emperor realm, you will be able to crawl in.
Bailey said. Crawl in through the dog gate? Impossible. With my talent, if the gate of heaven doesn't work, why can't I go through the gate of earth? I'll go through the gate of earth. Many people discussed among themselves. Following that, a young man stepped out and walked toward the gate of earth. The gate of earth was different from the gate of heaven. As soon as the young man stepped into the gate of earth began to glow. Then, rays of light shot toward the young man. The young man roared and used all his strength to defend himself. However, before he could block more than a few moves, the rays of light pierced through all his defenses and penetrated his body. He was torn into pieces and died on the spot. Another prodigy had fallen. All the new members' faces turned ugly. One had to know that the prodigy just now was not weak. How weak could his talent be if he could control divine grade divine power? However, if he could not even pass through the gate of earth, he would die. Is the gate of earth so difficult? Damn it, did you all pass through the human gate in the past?
One of the new members looked at the old members.
Pass through the human gate? Hee hee. Some of the older members smiled non-committally. It can't be, right? Many people felt a chill in their hearts. They couldn't have passed through the dog gate, right? A prodigy who controlled divine grade divine power passed through the dog gate? I don't believe that I can't even pass through the human gate.
With a roar, another young man stepped out.
This time he chose the human gate. Chapter 2994. A young man stepped out. A powerful aura erupted from his body, and his body was shrouded in divine force. Bam! Step by step, he cautiously stepped into the human gate. Bas! As soon as he stepped into the human gate, it vibrated slightly and emitted a dazzling light.
Then, a ray of divine light flew towards the young man.
Block it!
The young man roared and his divine force erupted. He pushed his hands forward and a ferocious beast pounced out.
Boom!
The divine light bombarded the ferocious beast and there was a violent explosion.
The ferocious beast trembled violently.
Block it, block it! The young man roared and used all his strength.
However, in the next moment, the ferocious beast exploded. The young man groaned and retreated.
There was a wound on his chest that penetrated his bones.
Again.
The young man roared and his eyes were filled with determination.
He had to succeed. He had to enter the human gate. Otherwise, if he wanted to enter Star Moon Ancient City and obtain the opportunity, he would have to enter through the dog gate. This was unacceptable to him. Bam! Once again, he stepped into the human gate. However, the human gate did not show any mercy.
It continued to shine and a ray of divine light blasted towards him. This time, the young man was in an even worse state.
His body was almost torn apart. He was sent flying out of the human gate and fell heavily on the ground. His aura was weak but he managed to survive. A young man who was familiar with him gave him a divine pill to heal his injuries. Let me tell you. If you can't do it, don't force yourself. Be careful not to lose your life here. Bailey said coldly. Many people's faces turned ugly. Did they really have to enter through the dog gate? Let me try. Then, another new member stepped out and stepped into the human gate.
However, like the previous person, this person was sent flying out of the human gate, although his injuries were slightly lighter.
Hee hee, those without talent better not go forward. Obediently enter through the dog gate to avoid getting injured.
An old member smiled faintly.
That's right. I wonder how many of these new members can pass through the dog gate.
Haha.
Another old member laughed disdainfully. Let me do it.
At this moment, a cold voice was heard and a young man in a blood-red robe stepped out.
Lu Ming recognized this person. He was Wu Shue's senior brother. It's him.
Many of the new members' eyes lit up.
The blood-robed young man was definitely the best among this batch of new members. If even he couldn't enter through the human gate, then most of the new members would have to enter through the dog gate. The blood-robed young man's face was cold. His entire body was shrouded in blood-red divine power. Step by step, he stepped into the human gate.
Just like before, As soon as the blood-robed young man stepped into the human gate, the human gate glowed. An array of godly light shot toward the blood-robed young man.
Blood pool abyss.
The blood-robed young man roared as he pushed his hands forward, causing an abyss to appear in front of him. Inside the abyss, blood-red mist constantly rolled, emitting a horrifying aura. The abyss spread out and enveloped the divine light emitted by the human gate.
Rumble.
Inside the abyss, loud rumbling sounds could be heard. It was shaking continuously as if it was going to explode at any moment. The blood-robed young man shouted as he continuously circulated his divine power. The veins on his face bulged as he tried his best to stabilize the blood pool abyss. Slowly, the tremors in the abyss subsided and finally disappeared.
Whoosh.
The blood-robed young man heaved a sigh of relief. He was overjoyed as he took a deep breath and continued to step forward. Next, the human gate was very stable and there were no abnormalities. The blood-robed young man successfully passed through the human gate and came to the common passage behind the 4 gates.
He passed.
Many of the new members were overjoyed. Finally, someone could pass. As long as he could pass, it meant that it was not an impossible task. The power will vary according to one's cultivation level.
Lu Ming pondered.
Through his observation, Lu Ming realized that the different groups of people who entered the human gate had different cultivation levels. However, the power of the human gate would also be different. The higher one's cultivation level, the stronger the power. No wonder Bai Li said that the test of the 4 gates had nothing to do with one's cultivation level but talent.
This gate could test one's talent.
After the blood-robed young man passed, he did not immediately enter the passage into Xingyue ancient city. Instead, he stood there and watched. He wanted to see who could pass through the earth gate and if anyone could pass through the heaven gate.
Let me.
Following that, more and more people stepped forward. However, they were all new members. The old members did not have any intention to take action and just watched from the side. Most of the new members chose the human gate. Some failed and some succeeded. Lu Ming realized that less than half of them could pass through the human gate. Most of the time they failed. Those who failed walked to the side dejectedly and did not intend to pass through the dog gate immediately. If they wanted to pass through the dog gate, they would have to wait until the end. With so many people watching, how embarrassing would that be? Bam! At this moment, a figure stepped out and attracted everyone's attention. That was because this person did not step into the human gate but the earth gate.
Jin Xing. Lu Ming's eyes moved.
The person who stepped into the earth gate was Jin Xing. It's him, Jin Xing from the Jin family. The others also recognized Jin Xing. I heard that Jin Xing is one of the 4 most outstanding young prodigies in the Jin family. Although he's young, his talent is terrifying. Yes, the Jin family is amazing. They have many geniuses, especially in this generation. They have 4 terrifying sky prides and each is more monstrous than the other.
I wonder if Jin Xing can pass through the earth gate.
Many people were discussing. The Jin family was ranked at the top among the major families in the 9 extinction Heavenly King Mansion. They were very powerful. Everyone's eyes fell on Jin Xing. Jin Xing's body was shrouded in golden light as if he was a golden man. 7th level Heavenly God. Back in Qin Tian Galaxy, Jin Xing's cultivation base was 6th level Heavenly God. Now, he had reached 7th level Heavenly God.
Dong. Finally, he stepped into the earth gate. The earth gate shook slightly.
Then, it emitted a dazzling light. A few rays of divine light blasted toward Jin Xing. The human gate only had 1 ray of divine light, while the earth gate had 3 rays. Moreover, the rays seemed to be more dazzling. Void-shattering hand. Jin Xing roared. His palms turned golden as he blasted out continuously. A terrifying whistling sound exploded in the air. The void-shattering hand was extremely powerful. It collided with the 3 rays of light from the earth gate.
Dong, dong, dong.
3 terrifying rumbling sounds rang out as explosions occurred in the void. Powerful qi overflowed in all directions. Jin Xing's entire body was golden, incomparably dazzling. Did he block it? Many people's hearts were in their mouths as they watched with their eyes wide open. The next moment, the light dimmed. Everyone saw Jin Xing's body standing upright on the earth gate. He was not injured. He blocked it. Someone exclaimed. He can pass through the earth gate. This time, even the senior members were a little surprised.
Chapter 2995.
One of the Jean family's 4 heroes is indeed extraordinary. Many people exclaimed. This time, another one of the Jean family's 4 heroes came. I heard that his cultivation has reached the half-step divine king realm. I wonder which door he will pass through. It's Jin Yuan. Jin Yuan has been to Xingyue ancient city once. Last time, he entered through the earth door. This time, he will most likely attempt the heaven door. I'm looking forward to it. Many people discussed as they looked at the other golden-robed youth. This youth was tall and sturdy. He was the other member of the Jin family's 4 heroes, Jin Yuan. The Jin family's 4 heroes were not ranked by cultivation, but by talent. In terms of cultivation, many of the younger generation of the Jin family were above Jin Xing. Jin Yuan had his hands behind his back. Obviously, he did not intend to make a move now. Bam! Bam! After Jin Xing blocked the first wave of attacks from the earth door, there were no more abnormalities on the earth door. He continued to move forward and stepped into the passage behind the door. However, he did not enter Xingyue ancient city through the passage. Instead, he stood there and watched. In fact, almost none of the other people who had passed through the door had entered Xingyue ancient city. They were all standing in the passage and watching. This time, they could stay in Xingyue ancient city for 10 years. They had plenty of time and were not in a hurry. Why aren't you old members moving yet? Let me see if your talent and potential have improved after so many years. At this time, Bai Li spoke as he looked at the old members. Talent wasn't something that would never change. Usually, talent was determined by the heavens. However, that was not always the case. There were some rare treasures in the world that could increase one's potential and accumulate more potential. Some treasures could even improve one's comprehension. Lu Ming's comprehension had improved when he participated in the War of Providence in the Divine Wilderness continent. The most important thing was divine power. The talent of a prodigy who controlled divine-grade divine power would also improve as their divine power awakened. Think about it. The primordial divine spirits that were born at the beginning of the universe. Their divine-grade divine power contained the genes of the primordial divine spirits. When one's divine power awakened, the talent of the cultivator would also skyrocket. Therefore, it did not mean that it would not work now. It did not mean that they could not pass through the human door last time. Bai Li wanted to see how much progress the old members had made. Let me. As soon as Bai Li finished speaking, an old member stepped forward. This person released his aura. He was at the 9th level of the heavenly deity realm. He walked towards the human gate with a solemn expression. The last time he came in, he didn't pass through the human gate and had to crawl through the dog gate in humiliation. This time, he must pass through the human gate. Bang! He stepped into the human gate. Suddenly, the human gate shone, and a beam of divine light slashed at him. He roared angrily and did his best to block the divine light. In the end, he was seriously injured, coughing out large mouthfuls of blood. However, in the end, he stopped it. The divine light scattered. Ha ha, I passed. The young man burst out laughing as he stepped into the passageway. His face was filled with excitement. He had failed the last time, but this time, he focused on his cultivation, and the degree of his awakening had increased significantly. Finally, he passed the human gate. The eyes of many old members lit up as they saw hope. Let me. Immediately, another old member walked towards the human gate. This old member also failed to pass through the human gate last time. He entered through the dog gate. When he saw that a young man had passed through the human gate, his confidence increased greatly. However, when he stepped into the human gate and was attacked, he screamed in agony and was blasted out. He was severely injured. He failed. Damn it! That person roared angrily, extremely unwilling to give up. Last time, he passed through the dog gate. This time, he had to pass through the dog gate too. His face was burning. After all, it was not that easy to improve one's talent. The young man from before dared to be the first to go up because he was very confident. As for the person behind him, although his cultivation base had improved compared to the last time, his talent did not. Of course he failed. The remaining people's expressions became much more serious. Following that, more and more people stepped forward. However, compared to the new members, the old members had a much higher success rate. More than half of them passed through the human gate. Of course, those who did not pass the human gate had extremely ugly expressions. In fact, some of the old members had already begun to attempt the earth gate, and many of them had succeeded. Those who succeeded had a high degree of awakening of their divine power. Those who had awakened more than 80 to 90% of their divine power were about to awaken their origin divine power factor. Look, Jin Yuan is about to make his move. Suddenly, a voice rang out, shocking everyone. Sure enough, Jin Yuan moved. He walked step by step toward the 4 gates. Which gate is he going to choose? The Earth Gate or the Heaven Gate? Someone whispered. Everyone was guessing. He chose the Heaven Gate. Someone exclaimed because Jin Yuan's figure was walking toward the Heaven Gate. Many people's eyes were filled with anticipation. This time, someone who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth had stepped into the Heaven Gate. In the end, other than being killed, no one else had stepped into the Heaven Gate. Could Jin Yuan succeed? Last time, Jin Yuan had passed through the Earth Gate. As he approached the Heaven Gate, a dazzling golden light appeared on Jin Yuan's body. Layers of golden divine power shrouded him, and an ancient aura emanated from Jin Yuan's body. Origin Divine Power Factor. Bai Li exclaimed in a low voice. His eyes suddenly lit up. What? Origin Divine Power Factor? Jin Yuan has awakened his Origin Divine Power Factor? How terrifying. He can awaken his Origin Divine Power Factor at the half-step Divine King realm. No wonder he's one of the 4 heroes of the Jin clan. Many people exclaimed. It was extremely difficult to awaken one's Origin Divine Power Factor. Even prodigies had to reach the Divine King realm to awaken their Origin Divine Power Factor. Most people might not be able to awaken their Origin Divine Power Factor, even after reaching the Divine King realm. Those who could awaken their Origin Divine Power Factor below the Divine King realm were extremely rare. Every one of them was a prodigy among prodigies. Jin Yuan belonged to this category. The last time Jin Yuan came to Xueqi ancient city, he did not awaken his Origin Divine Power Factor. This time, he has successfully awakened his Origin Divine Power Factor. His talent has greatly increased. It's very likely that he will pass the Heaven Gate. Some people were discussing. At this time, Jin Yuan had already stepped into the Heaven Gate. The Heaven Gate was different from the Earth Gate and the Human Gate. The first part of the Heaven Gate was normal. When Gold Ingot was halfway there, he suddenly stopped and began to move. It had begun. Everyone knew that the assessment of the Heaven Gate had just begun. Everyone held their breaths and watched quietly. They were wondering if Jin Yuan could pass the Heaven Gate. Every time they came to Xueqi ancient city, only a few could pass the Heaven Gate. Sometimes, none could pass the Heaven Gate. Chapter 2996. Time passed by slowly. 15 minutes later, Jin Yuan's body finally trembled. Many people's hearts also skipped a beat. Would Jin Yuan be able to pass? The next moment, everyone knew the answer. A powerful aura erupted from Jin Yuan's body again. He stood straight and did not retreat. However, his face was a little pale. He stepped forward and continued to walk inside. He passed. He really passed the gate of heaven. This is amazing. Jin Yuan is probably one of the strongest prodigies who entered Star Moon Ancient City this time, right? Indeed. A half-step godly king who has awakened the Origin Divine Power Factor is almost invincible among those below the godly king realm. Many people looked at Jin Yuan with fear in their eyes. Those who had not awakened the Origin Divine Power Factor would not be able to withstand a single attack from Jin Yuan unless they had some terrifying secret technique. Finally, Jin Yuan stepped into the passage and turned to look at them. He also wanted to see if anyone else could pass the gate of heaven. Jin Yuan, you're not bad. Let me try. At that moment, another young man stepped out. This young man was wearing a beast skin coat and looked like a tycoon. However, no one dared to underestimate him. This was because the aura that he exuded was extremely terrifying. It was filled with an ancient aura that was quite similar to Jin Yuan's aura. Origin Divine Power Factor. Many people were shocked. This person was also a peerless prodigy who had awakened the Origin Divine Power Factor. The Origin Divine Power Factor was the divine power controlled by the primordial divine spirit. Therefore, once the Origin Divine Power Factor was awakened, it would naturally exude an ancient aura. This time, 2 people had awakened the Origin Divine Power Factor. This person was very direct and stepped into the gate of heaven. Halfway through he stopped. A moment later, he came to his senses and successfully passed the gate of heaven.
he used about the same time as Jin Xing. Their gazes collided, causing sparks to fly. However, the crowd's shock did not stop. This was because two more prodigies stepped out in succession and walked toward the gate of heaven. Moreover, they both passed the gate of heaven. They had all awakened the origin divine power factor. This batch is not bad. There are actually 4 people below the godly king realm who have awakened the origin divine power factor. Bai Li smiled. To be able to awaken the origin divine power factor while below the divine king level, one's future was limitless. Brother Lu, we're going too, Wu Ming and Wu Yu said. Then, they went up together with the other geniuses of the Wu family. In the end, Wu Ming and Wu Yu were injured and finally passed through the human gate. As for the Wu family, a prodigy had passed the earth gate. Autumn Moon, let's go too. Which door do you want to go through? Lu Ming asked Mid-Autumn Moon. Young master, I want to try the gate of heaven. Autumn Moon blinked and looked curiously at the divine gate. Let's give it a try. Lu Ming smiled. Although the heavenly gate was dangerous, he believed in the Mid-Autumn Moon. If Jin Yuan and the others could pass, he did not believe that Autumn Moon could not pass as well. Although Autumn Moon had not awakened her origin divine power factor, she had awakened the 9 orifices sacred heart. It was only a first heaven divine power factor of origin. His talent could not be compared to the 9 orifices sacred heart. Young master, I'll go and wait for you. Xueqi smiled and floated out. What a beautiful lady. Many people's eyes lit up when they saw Autumn Moon. However, their eyes widened the next moment. Autumn Moon was walking towards the heavenly gate. She wants to enter the heavenly gate? Someone exclaimed and stuttered. Even Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and the others were shocked. Miss Autumn Moon, please don't. This gate is very dangerous. Wu Ming could not help but shout. Yes, Mississippi. This is not a joke. It's life-threatening. Be careful. The others also spoke. It would be a pity if such a beautiful lady like Autumn Moon were to die. Thank you, everyone. However, I want to give it a try. Autumn Moon smiled and continued to walk into the heavenly gate. Her aura also spread out. 2nd level Heavenly God. Her cultivation is only at 2nd level Heavenly God. With such a low cultivation, it's impossible for her to awaken the origin divine force factor. What a pity. Many people sighed. They thought that Xueqi was most likely going to die. Soon, Autumn Moon came to the middle of the heavenly gate. Then, she stopped and remained motionless. Everyone watched attentively. Although many people thought that it was impossible for Autumn Moon to pass, they also hoped that Autumn Moon would pass. After all, it was a pity for such a beautiful lady to die here. Time passed slowly. About 5 minutes had passed. Look, she moved. How is it? Something's not right. Someone exclaimed. Because at this moment, Autumn Moon moved. However, she was not blasted out as expected. Instead, she stood there steadily. Could it be that she passed? Impossible, right? But at the next moment, they had to accept this fact because Autumn Moon turned around and smiled at Lu Ming, saying, Young master, I'll go first. After saying that, she floated forward and landed on the passage. She really passed? How was that possible? A 2nd-level celestial god who had not awakened the divine origin power factor could actually pass through the heavenly gate. How terrifying was her talent? Many young men's eyes were shining with a burning light. With such talent and such a beautiful appearance, many people's hearts began to burn. If they could get such a beauty as their wife, how awesome would that be? Wait a minute. Then, many people couldn't help but look at Lu Ming. Just now, Autumn Moon called Lu Ming young master. Such a beautiful and talented person was actually someone else's maid. What does this kid do? I'll find a chance to teach this kid a lesson. Many people snorted in their hearts and began to think of some ideas. Lu Ming naturally noticed those gazes, but he ignored them and said, Autumn Moon, I'll be right there. After saying that, Lu Ming stepped out. The door that he walked towards was naturally the heavenly gate. What? This kid also passed through the heavenly gate? No way. Does he think that the heavenly gate is that easy to pass? I don't believe that he can pass through the heavenly gate. Many people whispered and stared at Lu Ming. Many people could see that his cultivation was at the 4th level celestial god realm. It was already a miracle that Autumn Moon could pass through. They didn't believe that Lu Ming could pass through as well. Everyone's eyes fell on Lu Ming, including Jin Xing, Jin Yuan, and some of the geniuses of the Qin family. "I hope this kid dies in the Heavenly Gate," a genius of the Qin family sneered. If Lu Ming died in the Heavenly Gate, they wouldn't have to make a move. Bai Li's gaze also fell on Lu Ming. He was extremely curious. Previously, when Autumn Moon passed through the Heavenly Gate, he was already very surprised. Could Lu Ming pass through? Chapter 2997. Lu Ming had a faint smile on his face as he walked into the Gate of Heaven unhurriedly. Soon, he arrived in the middle of the Gate of Heaven. As soon as he arrived in the middle of the Gate of Heaven, Lu Ming felt a force shrouding him. This force was irresistible and ancient. It shrouded Lu Ming's body, making him unable to move. Then, Lu Ming felt his vision go dark. The next moment, he appeared on a platform. "This is my spirit." Lu Ming was stunned. He knew that his physical body must still be outside. What appeared here was his spirit will. Next, there must be a test waiting for him. Sure enough, a figure appeared in front of him. The figure's appearance couldn't be seen clearly. It was like a human's shadow. Whoosh! The shadow moved. There was a long sword in his hand. He stabbed at Lu Ming as fast as lightning. Sky Piercer! Lu Ming's mind moved. A long spear condensed in his hand and he stabbed it out. Boom! The long spear and the sword shadow collided. Lu Ming felt a terrifying sword chi rushing toward him. The long spear in his hand instantly collapsed. His body was pushed back and was almost pierced by the sword. What a powerful force! Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. Although he had attacked in a hurry and did not activate the battle character art, with his current divine power, a casual strike from his spear could kill an enemy that was several levels higher than him. However, the result was that he was pushed back. It wasn't hard to imagine how others could pass this place. Ordinary sky prides would only be killed in seconds. Whoosh! Since the shadow did not manage to hit Lu Ming, it continued to attack at an alarming speed. Streaks of sword shadows charged toward Lu Ming. Double combat strength. With a thought, he triggered the battle formula to double combat strength. Suddenly, his body was filled with power. It really works. I can trigger the battle formula just by using my spirit will. Lu Ming himself was also taken aback. He was just trying it out. He didn't expect it to work. After triggering the double combat strength, Lu Ming's combat strength skyrocketed. The long spear swept out. Bang! 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 After activating the battle character art, Lu Ming's battle prowess was completely above his opponent's. His spear light crushed his opponent's sword images. In the end, the long spear struck the shadow's body. The shadow's body directly exploded and turned into an illusion. There should be more, Lu Ming muttered. He did not believe that he could pass through the Gate of Heaven so easily. Sure enough, in the next moment, 3 shadows appeared in front of him and charged towards Lu Ming. However, even the 3 shadows were no match for the current Lu Ming. Moon slaying, Lu Ming displayed the second style of the indestructible 3 strikes. A crescent-shaped spear light swept out and destroyed a shadow. Soon, the 3 shadows were all killed. However, that was not the end. After the 3 shadows disappeared, another 9 shadows appeared. The 9 shadows worked together to lay down a large formation, and the power of the formation increased by many times. Streaks of terrifying sword shadows slashed towards Lu Ming with terrifying power. There was no doubt that if Lu Ming was really hit by the sword shadows, his body would also be seriously injured. In the beginning, when a person stepped into the Gate of Heaven, he died with a blood mark between his eyebrows and his soul destroyed. Most likely, he suffered such an attack. This made Lu Ming feel a little pressured. Quadruple battle prowess. Lu Ming did not bother to delay and directly activated the battle character art to quadruple his battle prowess. After quadrupling his battle prowess, Lu Ming naturally defeated his opponent in a crushing manner. Under the pressure of the long spear, the shadows kept exploding and finally disappeared. Is it over? It can't be so fast, Lu Ming whispered. Sure enough, it was not that simple. In the next moment, 18 shadows appeared and formed a large formation, charging towards Lu Ming. Should I try the ancient god body? Forget it, it's better to keep a low profile. Lu Ming thought about it and decided not to use the ancient god body.
After using the ancient god body, he would definitely be crushed again. If this was the last round, then the time Lu Ming used was too short. It had only been a little more than a minute since he entered the gate of heaven. Previously, Jin Yuan and the others took 15 minutes. Autumn Moon also took 5 minutes. If he finished it in a minute, it would be too shocking. Therefore, he was entangled with the 18 shadows. Even the large formation formed by the 18 shadows was no match for Lu Ming. Therefore, Lu Ming dealt with it easily. Almost 5 minutes had passed. Lu Ming's spear suddenly changed and its power increased sharply. Boom! The spear light pressed down like a mountain and destroyed the opponent's large formation. Then, he attacked continuously and killed all 18 shadows. There should be no more. Lu Ming muttered. If there were more, he did not believe that Jin Yuan and the others could pass. As expected, after the shadows disappeared this time, a force appeared. Lu Ming's vision turned black again. The next moment, when he opened his eyes, he found that he was still standing in the middle of the gate of heaven. It's not that difficult. Lu Ming stretched and smiled at Autumn Moon. Then he stepped forward, passed through the gate of heaven, and walked to Autumn Moon's side. Passed. Many people were dumbfounded and completely stunned. Autumn Moon had passed, and now, Lu Ming had passed. One was a level 2 celestial god, and the other was a level 4 celestial god. What was going on? Were their talents really that terrifying? Humph. The people of the Qin family, Jin Xing, and the others looked gloomy. This time, it's amazing. Bai Li's eyes lit up as he glanced at Lu Ming and Autumn Moon. He knew the difficulty of the gate of heaven better than the others. Those who could pass without awakening the origin divine power factor were unimaginably talented. It was rare to meet such geniuses, but now, there were 2 of them at the same time. Amazing. Wu Ming, Wu Yu, and a few other people of the Wu family were amazed. I don't believe it. Is the difficulty of the gate of heaven lowered this time? At this moment, someone shouted. A young man in a yellow robe stepped forward. Lowered? Many people were stunned. That's right. I suspect that the difficulty of the gate of heaven has lowered this time. Otherwise, how could so many people pass? Even 2 level 2 and level 4 heavenly gods who have not awakened the origin divine power factor can pass? I don't believe it. The young man in the yellow robe said. But someone tried it before and was killed in an instant. Someone questioned. That's because that person is too useless. The young man in the yellow robe said. Humph, if you think the difficulty has lowered, then you can give it a try. Jin Yuan snorted coldly. The young man in the yellow robe said that the difficulty of the gate of heaven had lowered. Wasn't that doubting his talent? Of course he was unhappy. That's what I want. I'm going to give it a try. The young man in the yellow robe said. After saying that, he walked toward the gate of heaven. The aura on his body bloomed, and a powerful pressure spread in all directions. This person was also a half-step divine king. Only 80% of the origin divine power factor has been awakened. Jin Yuan snorted coldly. Chapter 2998. The young man in yellow robes released his divine power. Jin Yuan could tell that the young man's divine power had been awakened to about 80% of his divine power. If even the 2 of them can pass, it means that I've awakened 80% of my divine power. That's enough. The young man in yellow robes said coldly. Then, he stepped forward and stepped into the gate of heaven. However, when he stepped into the gate of heaven, his expression became serious. Although he said that the difficulty of the gate of heaven had been reduced, he did not dare to relax at all. He was fully alert. When he was halfway to the heavenly gate, he was like Lu Ming previously. His body froze and he did not move. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the young man in yellow robes. If he could pass the gate of heaven, it meant that the difficulty of the gate of heaven had indeed been reduced. 2 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, the young man in yellow robes trembled. How is it? Everyone's hearts trembled. Then the young man in yellow robes screamed. His body flew out of the gate of heaven as if he had been hit by a giant beast. He crashed to the ground and vomited blood. His aura was extremely weak. Everyone saw that there was a crack between the young man's eyebrows. Blood was flowing out continuously. The yellow-robed young man's eyes were filled with terror. He had almost died. It was obvious that the young man in yellow robes had failed. He had failed miserably and had almost died. The difficulty of the gate of heaven has not been reduced at all.
Someone whispered. Upon hearing this, everyone's gaze returned to Lu Ming and Qiu Yu.
The difficulty of the gate of heaven had not been reduced.
Lu Ming and Autumn Moon had each taken 5 minutes to pass. It was obvious that both of them were terrifyingly talented.
In particular, Jin Xing, Jin Yuan, and the other prodigies who had passed the gate of heaven looked at Lu Ming with murderous intent.
Everyone, we'll leave it to you to enter Xingyue Ancient City.
Lu Ming must die in Xingyue Ancient City. At that moment, a few prodigies from the Qin family secretly transmitted their voices to the other prodigies. He transmitted his voice to a few prodigies from a few families who were on good terms with the Qin family.
Don't worry.
As long as we meet him in Xingyue Ancient City, we won't let him come out alive.
Those prodigies replied.
At this moment, Lu Ming seemed to have sensed something and suddenly turned to look in the direction of the Qin family prodigy.
Just now, he had felt many murderous intents landing on him. It seems that in addition to the Jin family and the Qin family, there are other geniuses who want to kill me. A cold smile appeared on Lu Ming's face. If they wanted to kill him, they had to be prepared to be killed by him. Then, someone else chose to enter through the gate. Autumn Moon, let's go. Lu Ming watched for a while and lost interest. He pulled Autumn Moon's hand and walked towards the tunnel.
Yeah, let's go too.
Most of the experts have already made their moves. There's nothing much to see next. It's boring to watch people crawl through dog doors. Let's go. As soon as Lu Ming and Autumn Moon left, the others couldn't sit still any longer. One after another, they walked into the tunnel. Inside the passageway was not Star Moon Ancient City, but a door of light. A portal. It seems that this is the gate that leads to the inner part of Star Moon Ancient City. Lu Ming smiled and then stepped into the door of light with Autumn Moon.
Then, the others stepped into the door of light and disappeared.
After most of the people had entered the door of light, those outside also moved. Some of them blushed and crawled through the door of dog doors.
Then, they lowered their heads and ran into the door of light.
Half a day later, everyone had entered the door of light. Only Bai Li was left outside. The prodigies of the 4 heavenly kings have gathered. This time, I hope that they won't lose too much. I also hope that they will gain something. Bai Li muttered to himself and sat down cross-legged outside the room. He had to wait here for 10 years. As soon as Lu Ming stepped into the door of light, he felt as if he was traveling through the void. In the next moment, Lu Ming found himself in a canyon. Lu Ming frowned because he realized that Autumn Moon was not beside him. Lu Ming rose into the air and looked around. In the end, he realized that he was in a primitive forest. There was no sign of Autumn Moon. I've miscalculated. It turns out that entering Star Moon Ancient City is a random teleportation. Lu Ming whispered and could not help but worry. Among the prodigies who had entered Star Moon Ancient City, Autumn Moon's cultivation was the weakest. He was only a level 2 heavenly god. If he encountered someone with evil intentions, he would be in danger. Autumn Moon is also a person with great fortune. He should be fine. Lu Ming comforted himself. He took out his voice transmission jade talisman and realized that it could not be used. I'd better cultivate while looking for Autumn Moon. Lu Ming pondered for a while and then looked around. In the end, he realized that he had no idea where he was. He was surrounded by a primitive forest. I didn't expect that there would be a primitive forest in Star Moon Ancient City. Lu Ming mumbled. He then chose a direction and flew forward. The primitive forest was dense with divine aura. However, he did not find any living creatures. He did not find any divine beasts or desolate beasts. It was dead silent. After flying for a few hours, Lu Ming was still in the primitive forest. I'm so unlucky to be teleported to the wilderness as soon as I entered. Lu Ming curled his lips. In the end, he performed the 9 heavens Kuan Peng technique and transformed into a Kuan Peng to roam the 9 heavens. Just like that, Lu Ming flew for a day before he finally flew out of this primitive forest and saw the buildings. In front of him, there were many palaces built on top of a mountain. After flying in, he realized that these palaces were very dilapidated. Only ruins were left. However, these were the remains of the early heavenly palace era. Lu Ming was very curious and decided to go in and take a look. Boom! At this moment, there was a loud explosion from the ruins.
Divine power surged and gravel flew everywhere. Then, two figures flew out from the ruins and engaged in an intense battle in the air. It was obvious that the two of them were the supreme talents of the Starry Camp and they were fighting fiercely. However, when they saw Lu Ming, they were all shocked and retreated one after another. It's him! When the two of them saw Lu Ming, they recognized Lu Ming. After all, Lu Ming had passed the heavenly gate. The supreme talents of the Starry Camp remembered Lu Ming. It's this kid. Previously, the Qin family asked the Sun family to help them kill this kid. Looks like I'm lucky to have met this kid. Furthermore, this person's talent is so high. He might have a great opportunity on him. If I kill him, his opportunity will be mine. One of the young men with a big nose had a murderous look in his eyes. At the same time, there was greed in his eyes. Wang Tong, let's forget about today's matter. You can leave now. I won't be calculative with you. At the thought of this, the young man with a big nose looked at the person who had just fought with him and said,
Chapter 2999.
The big-nosed young man asked the person who was fighting with him to leave. The person smirked, but chose to leave in the end. His strength was slightly weaker than the big-nosed young man. If the battle dragged on, he would not stand a chance. He glanced at Lu Ming with a smirk, before turning into a ray of light and leaving the place. As soon as the young man left, the big-nosed young man appeared beside Lu Ming with a flicker.
A wisp of aura locked onto Lu Ming. Are you trying to kill me?
Lu Ming said calmly with a spurious smile on his face. You're not stupid either. The big-nosed young man's eyes turned cold. A powerful aura burst out from his body, covering the area within 10,000 li. The big-nosed young man was a 9th-layer Heaven God Realm cultivator. His god force had also awakened to a certain extent, but it was less than 50%. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think I've offended you. Tell me, who sent you to kill me?
Jin clan or Qin clan? Lu Ming asked. Why are you asking so many questions when you're about to die?
The big-nosed young man smirked.
Oh, it's fine if you don't want to tell me. It's either the Jin clan or the Qin clan. Speaking of which, I don't think you're well informed. Are you sure you can kill me? Lu Ming said with a smile.
The big-nosed young man most likely did not know he had defeated Lang Ying.
Otherwise, he would not be so confident. What do you mean?
The big-nosed young man was startled. I mean, I'll send you on your way now.
Lu Ming's cold voice could be heard. Following it, Lu Ming stepped forward.
His body expanded rapidly, transforming into the flesh of the ancient god. Meanwhile, the battle character art was activated, which amplified his strength by 4 times. A ferocious aura surged in the direction of the big-nosed young man. This aura. Impossible. The big-nosed young man was astounded when he sensed Lu Ming's aura. Lu Ming's aura made his heart tremble. Bang!
Lu Ming attacked.
A giant spear glow was fired at the big-nosed young man. Path of War! Roared the big-nosed young man. A long spear appeared in his hand, which he waved through the air, causing numerous war chariots to appear. There were even warriors on the war chariots. The war chariot rumbled towards Lu Ming. The big-nosed young man came from the Sun family, a great family in the 9-extinction Heavenly King Mansion. The secret skill was unique to the Sun family and its power was shocking. However, when Lu Ming's spear light pressed down, the chariots collapsed one by one. Following this, all the chariots shattered into pieces. Boom! Under the pressure of the spear, the big-nosed young man was forced to retreat while vomiting blood.
How is that possible? How can he be so strong?
The big-nosed young man roared in his heart. Indeed, he didn't know that Lu Ming had defeated Lang Ying. Therefore, he assumed that Lu Ming was merely a 4th-level heavenly god. No matter how talented he was, he couldn't be that strong. Never would he have thought that he would be severely injured in just one move. Run! The big-nosed young man immediately turned around and ran. It's too late to run now.
Lu Ming's cold voice appeared.
He executed the 9 heavens Kuanping art, summoning a Kuanping. With a flap of its wings, Lu Ming immediately chased after the big-nosed young man.
Sky-piercing.
Lu Ming thrust his spear forward, firing a spear glow at the big-nosed young man at a shocking pace. The big-nosed young man let out a furious roar when he realized that he had no chance of running away. He swung his spear to defend himself. However, he was knocked flying once again. He flew for a few thousand li. His arm was torn apart, resulting in a serious injury. The big-nosed young man's strength was on par with Leng Ying's. Previously, when Lu Ming was fighting Leng Ying, he still had to put in some effort. However, now that Lu Ming was circulating 7 different kinds of God Force in his body, even though most of his God Force had yet to reach its peak, his strength had improved significantly. He could easily crush Leng Ying. Lu Ming, if you dare to kill me, the Sun family won't forgive you. The big-nosed young man yelled. Kill! Lu Ming could not be bothered to talk nonsense with his opponent. He launched a barrage of attacks. The big-nosed young man barely managed to block a few more moves before his head was struck by Lu Ming's spear, killing him instantly. With a wave of his hand, Lu Ming kept the big-nosed young man's storage ring. His figure flashed as he rushed toward the ruins on the mountain peak. It was unknown how many years had passed since the collapse of the ruins. It was conceivable that there must have been a great array around the mountain in the distant past. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the ruins to still exist after such a long time had passed. Most likely, nothing was left of the ruins. Lu Ming looked around and was slightly disappointed as he did not find anything. Lu Ming did not linger. He soared into the sky and left the place. In the following day, Lu Ming did not find anything. That's... On this day, Lu Ming was flying when he suddenly felt something strange ahead. He could vaguely feel a pressure coming from ahead. In Xingyue ancient city, he could not let go of any abnormalities. Lu Ming's figure flashed as he flew forward. Not long after, Lu Ming made a discovery. There was a statue standing in a wide area in front of him. The statue was very huge, at least 100 miles tall, and it stood in the clouds. However, this statue was headless, with only the lower half of its body standing on the ground. The pressure was coming from the statue. The closer he got to the statue, the greater the pressure. Lu Ming's body was pressed down, making it difficult for him to circulate the divine power in his body. It was as if he was carrying 1,000 pounds of shackles. Lu Ming saw that there were a few figures around the statue. Some of them were approaching the statue, while others were standing still with their bodies trembling slightly as if they were resisting the pressure of the statue. They are using the pressure of the statue to polish their foundation. Lu Ming immediately guessed the intention of those people. His eyes also lit up. Previously on the Demon Capital Mountain, in order to resist the formation set up by the 3 demon masters and more than 2,500 demon capital guards, he had forcibly absorbed the energy of the Star Core to break through to the next level. Although he had successfully broken through to the 4th layer Heaven God realm, it had also brought him a hidden danger, which was the instability of his foundation. If his foundation was unstable, even if the divine power in his body was full, it would be difficult for him to break through to the next level. He would have to spend a lot of time to polish his foundation. Meanwhile, the statue was emitting a terrifying pressure, which Lu Ming could use to polish his foundation. Lu Ming stepped forward and landed 1,000 miles away from the statue. He then stepped forward and walked toward the statue. As Lu Ming approached the statue, the pressure he felt increased. It was as if he was carrying a godly mountain on his back. It was the same for his divine power. It was getting harder and harder to circulate it. Lu Ming was overjoyed instead of being shocked. He needed this kind of pressure, the kind that was applied to his divine power. However, the pressure is not enough. Lu Ming murmured as he continued to move forward. Soon, he had surpassed the 2 young men. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.